And you have those 3 positions. That has not changed. The BCBA teacher, the job coach for our 18 to 22-year-olds at the high school. That's an instructional assistant position. And also the high school sped teacher as we begin to implement co-teaching in grades 9 and 10. None of that has changed. I wish I could tell you, however, that there has not been a need to add another position in special ed. But most recently, in the last week, we have received notification from our SPED director that due to a move-in, we are going to have to add a one-on-one SPED assistant for a student. So that was not reflected in the budget. That will need to be reflected in the budget moving forward. And so that is our only addition that we have made, again, as part of our compliance requirements under special ed. Does anyone in the committee or anyone in the audience, I don't know, have any questions with respect to our budget? As I said, nothing has changed. The PowerPoint presentation that we made on March 5th remains the same. The positions that we are looking for remain the same. And I would again reiterate that those 3 positions that we call our compliance and safety positions are positions that are being funded out of your budget. They will, as you know, the committee voted at its last meeting for recommendation number 1, which would basically pass on this additional assessment to both towns. Certainly this evening you will certify your budget again in the public meeting. But just so that you are aware, as of our last meeting, prior to the need to add this additional new position, we would need to, had you not, or should you change your mind with respect to recommendation 1, which would be to pass on that additional expense as we know it right now to both towns, we would be taking the $149,000 from 2 areas, around $97,000 from E&D, and the rest of that from circuit breaker, the 52. Now that 52 will increase by the additional cost from the new position that we need to add. So at this point in time, I simply want to say, unless you have questions, I would simply be going over the same thing over again that you have in the PowerPoint from March 5th.
Does anyone want to come forward to, wait, first let's see if anybody in the audience wants to ask any questions this evening on the budget. Okay, Kathy.
On that special ed assistant that we have to add, will that mean the ones that was going to be laid off will be able to take that position?
Sure. Yes,
So
absolutely.
that will cut a little bit of the unemployment.
Right,
So
right.
what's the net difference then in the job about?
I think we're adding 4 new positions.
So I mean, just that one position, how much would that cost? That
The
particular-
delta would be about $16,000.
16,000? Okay,
At maximum
Okay.
unemployment.
thanks.
Now, your vote will happen in the public meeting.
It will happen in our regular school committee meeting. If there are no questions from the audience, then I'm going to close the public hearing for our budget of FY 2020. So the public hearing for the budget is now closed. I will now, the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District will open, will have a public hearing for school choice.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Nash will speak to that.
Thank you. Again, just by way of background, the committee is aware that the dependency of this budget on school choice is extremely high, that currently our district is looking to have for 1920 180 students who will be school choice. That will fund our budget and provide a little under $900,000, which is a necessity to balance the budget. So upon that, we have identified in conversations with the administrative team where those slots would be, and we're prepared this evening to make a recommendation to you. For, again, purposes of background, I wanted to just let the committee know how many students currently are in school choice. So currently, we have 15 students at the middle school levels. Those are distributed between grades 5, 6, 7, and 8, obviously. At the high school level, that's our biggest share, 133 students. So that is 148 students who are this year in school choice. We are looking to add additional seats, adding 60 more seats for next year. Give or take those, remember, we're exiting 28 or so, I think, seniors, Mr. Chaplin indicated, so we'll be filling those slots, if you will. So the number will end up being 180 students that we have, in essence, budgeted that we need. So the identification from the building principals, administrators for school choice openings next year are as follows. At the high school, 30 positions at grade 9. At our middle schools, at Dudley Middle School, 15 slots at grade 7. And at Charlton Middle School, we would take in 15 students also, but that would be split between grades 7 and 8. 7 at grade 7 and 8 at grade 8. So that's the total of 60. So my recommendation, which I'll reiterate again in the meeting, would be that you would move forward to approve school choice, and again, in those designated grades and for the designated numbers.
Do I have any questions? First, I'll take the audience for the public hearing. Do I have anyone that wants to come forward to ask us questions? Okay, Jamie?
What's the process to go through becoming an applicant for school choice?
We post the, if the committee approves the application, we would then update the application for next year. On that application, indicate the opening levels, where they are, the grades and the numbers. There would be a period of time that we would open the window, indicate that on our website. They would fill out these applications, either mail them in, email them in, drop them off to central office. At the close of that time, we would do, if we have more than the amount, we would have a lottery.
A lottery, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
I do have a question. Dr. Nash, if a student comes in school choice that is on a special ed plan, who carries the extra cost of that special ed plan?
Well, you can't discriminate, first of all.
Absolutely.
So that's number one. So number two, there is, for school choice, the flat $5,000 changes a bit. I wouldn't say that it's an extraordinary cost that it changes, but there is an increase that one gets for someone who has special needs or services that are delivered as part of special needs. I think the cost, if I remember, cap out somewhere below $15,000. So the normal cost for a regular student under school choice is $5,000. But when you get that sheet, if a student has been identified in your district, you will see that those costs look different. I don't know if you know the exact cost.
There's actually a form that you need to fill out and to record all of the costs, and then the state does its calculation. Historically, in our numbers, we've received around 70 to 90,000 in special ed increments.
Total for all of your students, special ed, but not for a single student. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What do the class sizes look like after adding these students to Dudley Middle School and Charlton Middle School?
I think if you looked at those grades that, I think we were looking at, 20.7, I think, if I remember correctly, was the number. So there'd be slight increases at those grade levels. I think it was pretty consistent. I'd have to let me quickly look to tell you. And I think that's the reason why both principals identified that they could take openings at those particular grades. So we were looking at, let's see, in grade, oops, sorry, I'm one step ahead of me. That's a total number. Okay. Looking at grade 7 at DMS next year is 21.4, CMS 20.7, and the same number in grade 8, same two numbers in grade 8.
Any other questions? Okay, and we will be voting on school choice at our regular school committee meeting this evening. Any
Excuse me, I'm sorry, that's just in your major content areas. It's not looking at your unified arts and those types of things. So we're looking at the major content.
Understood.
Any other questions by the board or anyone? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing for school choice. And now, the meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, March 27th. It is 6:40. 41, and we're at the Charlton Middle School, and we will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll entertain a motion to approve our minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, March 13th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay. All right, one abstention and 5 for. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session on March 13th.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? 5, and Elaine, you were here for the executive?
sorry.
Oh, okay. 1 abstention. Okay. Minutes of superintendent's interview session of Tuesday, February 11th. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous. Approval of the minutes of the superintendent interview session on Tuesday, February 26th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Approval of the warrants this evening. We do have warrants to be signed. Citizens Forum. Do we have anyone that would like to come forward to speak with the school committee this evening? Okay, seeing none. Moving right along to communications. Dr. Nash, do you have
Yeah, I do have
communications
communication this evening. 2 communications. First, just more of an FYI. Wanted to remind the committee and also the public that this week are the showcases that both at middle and high school. I spoke with the principal of Dudley Middle School last evening via text, as he told me about the success that he felt in the showcase approach to our, what used to be parent conferences in the spring. So I'll be very curious to hear tomorrow evening. I know that the high school is scheduled for tomorrow evening to hear how that goes. I have not heard from Mr. Packett, but I think if the success of Dudley Middle School and the feedback that Mr. Chachesky has heard is the same at the middle school in Charlton, then I think it certainly is something that we would probably want to consider for next year, continuing with. So they'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to report back to you at a later date when they're here. But I also want to report on another communication, hot off the press, from the Commissioner of Education. Sometimes when those come, you're not happy to get those. But I think today we're extremely happy to be recognized. So this is certainly an honor for our high school. We are one of 5 high schools in the state of Massachusetts to be notified, was it today? Yeah. To be notified today that we have been selected as part of the Innovation Programs Pathway. And again, most of you are familiar with some of the programs that we have instituted at the high school, our engineering and our biomedical. The state has now recognized that as part of this in achieving this distinction. We'll be involved with working with closely, obviously, with the state, hopefully with some of the money that they will send our way as being, again, part of the select group, but also in sharing with other communities around who have received this grant across the state. I think when I spoke with the 2 people who are chiefly leading this, high school principal Bill Chaplin and our STEAM director Karen Aries, you certainly have heard them talk about it before. Karen and Barbara will be presenting an update on curriculum April 10th, so you're going to hear more about it. I know I think there's a webinar coming up for those who've just been selected, and there is a meeting or a conference, if you will, convening in May for those who've been selected. This is part of the governor's big plan in infusing money to schools that are involved in this, that certainly recognize the need to have As we've talked about it before, equitable access for all students in clearly defining pathways for students that are going to be useful, that are going to be pathways that enhance their academic success, certainly in school, but also that connect students with really the real world and with business partners, as well as developing partnerships. So I think some of the work that we're doing in co-teaching around equitable access for students certainly connects to this beautifully, as well as looking in the future at our offerings at the high school, and particularly in looking at, in the future, your program of studies and your schedule. So all of those kind of things, I'm sure down the road, are going to come up as we start to move forward in this, but I really want to give kudos to both Bill and Karen, who really led this. And I know that when speaking with Karen today and speaking with Bill about it in the past, few months or so, actually back in the fall when we were looking, and I was talking to him and asking him about this, it's a lot of work just to get this recognition. It's not an easy process, as Karen told me today. Not only do you have to apply and do all of that written part, but they interview you and bring you in and talk to you about your programs and pathways. What better way to talk about relevance? We talk about sending our students off to vocational technical schools and the specialized fields that they have for students, and they certainly do. And there are programs that comprehensive high schools cannot offer. We're not going to be competitive with them. But we need to really engage students, and we really need to make relevant connections for students, particularly around some of these pathways that we've identified. So I really see this growing, and I see this impacting program of studies as well as our schedule at the high school. So I thank both of them, and I'm looking, even though I won't be here next year, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about this. So I wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Good job.
And you will hear from Karen and Bill and at the next meeting. Okay, and that is it for my communications.
Thank
Other
you.
than, I do want to say that Kaylee did come in to tell us that she will not be here this evening. Obviously, you can see that, our student rep. She had a PT visit for her back, which was a lot more important than sitting here, as I told her, listening to us for a long period of time this evening. So, but she did stop in to let us know that.
And I did get quite a few communications on the health insurance, as well as all the members did. And we can take it up on F when we talk about the joint purchasing group. So we are acknowledging all the communications we did take. So we'll wait until we get to F to discuss them. Okay, any other communication?
Can I make one comment? Just,
Go ahead.
I thought Kayla was going to be here, and I don't want this to go.
Okay.
It's the second year in a row that our art department has been selected to represent Massachusetts at the National Art Education Conference, that our Shepherd Hills art design was chosen for the second year in a row to represent Massachusetts on the Massachusetts
I know,
flag.
that was
of it.
wonderful.
So I didn't want, I thought Kayla was going to be able to say that. That's 2 years in a row. It's like, we're going to
I
go for
know,
a three-peat
that's
next year.
wonderful.
But it's really important that
Yeah.
our art department's phenomenal.
I
That
know.
that it's really important that people know that in the public.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill,
thank
can you
you.
give us an update on the show choir performances this weekend?
Sure, they were great. I wish I was with them.
We all-
They came in fourth, but it was really and that doesn't really matter. The experience that they had all weekend performing at Disney, they set them up for their last dinner in this massive Epcot like tundra, and they had dinner there, and they thought it was going to be just something little, and it was a wonderful spread. And then they were able to they were in this rotunda, and they were able to sing, and it was posted on Facebook. I don't know if anyone saw it, but they were able to sing 3 or 4 songs, and it was just them. It was to be able to be in that type of environment to sing and so forth was just wonderul.
Didn't I thought Anya was selected as the number
She
one
was.
vocalist.
She was, yeah, the best vocalist.
And the
And-
young boy Brian Santos?
Yep. But Brian Santos is he's the runner. He's number one in the
Okay,
nation.
no,
in terms
sorry,
of
get
running.
him mixed up.
I forget
But
his name, but there was
there was
another.
another,
It was
young
both
man.
best female and female
Yeah, right.
performance. So they were phenomenal. So I just wanted to make sure that art and
Thank you.
show choir. saw that.
Thank you. Thank you. Elaine?
I just wanted to update, I had been contacted by some past graduates from the district who were trying to support education funding and had been watching what was going on with the news regarding the Promise Act. So I was really pleased that they reached out because they wanted to understand the perspective of regional schools to do that. So I think it's reflective of the district that our graduates continue to care about education. So I wanted to bring that up. And then the other, I don't know if Dr. Nash is going to talk about it. There was a very lengthy day of education hearings on Beacon Hill on Friday. It actually went, they were lining up at 7 o'clock in the morning. They were still doing testimony at 6 o'clock at night. But the Narissa Wallen, who is the person who is one of the movers behind the regional information, has let us know that they're still accepting letters and commentary through this week on that. And the regional issue for what we were looking for is not covered under the Promise Act. So it's important that we speak on the regional perspective.
Thank you, Elaine. Anyone else? Okay. Superintendent's report, Dr. Nash.
I do not have a special topics report this evening.
Okay.
You have 2 presentations this
Right.
evening, so I did not think that you needed me to present.
Okay. And then we will skip the student rep report. Kaylee O'Brien will do that next time. That brings us to new business. 7 p.m. District Office Reorganization Final Report. Dr. Stephen Hemmon and Dr. Paul Gagliarducci.
So we're glad to be back. I guess a lot's happened since the last time we've been here, and congratulations on selecting your new superintendent. And I think this is the 3rd meeting that I've been at, and every meeting I've been at, there's always been some great news about the work that students do here at Dudley-Charlton. So congratulations on all that. Great achievements. Great work for the students. One of the things that this report hopefully does is to provide some information to the new incoming superintendent so that he'll be able to take a look at it and put his own personal touch on some of these things as well, and have hopefully a fruitful discussion with you people. We know what we have discussed with you what the scope of the services was, but in general, 2 specific areas. One was to take a look at the job descriptions relative to the central office operations, all the people who were sort of connected in central office, and then also to take a look at how we could make a recommendation to the school committee about what hopefully would be a much clearer sense of an organizational chart, all geared hopefully to increasing communication, making sure that everyone knew what their job was, who to go to when they needed to get some things done, who to report to, who was evaluated by who. All of those kinds of things we hope would be evident in the recommendations that we made. I want to make a statement about the job descriptions. and quite frankly, some of my bias about job descriptions. A long time ago, when I was first superintendent, more years ago than I would want to think, was given some good, I think, good advice by my school board lawyer in Connecticut about defining job descriptions. And if you were to sit down and ask somebody what they did, they would give you a laundry list of everything they did throughout the day, throughout the week. And in some cases, that's not really a job description. So our goal was to provide the scope of the job and then to allow the administrator who may be in charge of that person to decide other tasks that that person may have to accomplish. We also took a look at whether or not the job title reflected what the person did. And in some cases, we found that there probably, in our case, our recommendation would be to take a look at maybe some job title changes, and also to allow the new superintendent to have a discussion with the individual people in the central office operational grid, and that way it would give him a chance to know what that person does. One of the recommendations we make and early on is that you need to approve these job descriptions, obviously. They should become part of your policy manual. You also should probably take a look at your district legal services to have them take a look at the job descriptions to see if there's anything that maybe we didn't put in that they think would be helpful. And finally, you need to also know that there were some job descriptions that we looked at, especially in the area of custodians, that talked about certain physical limits. We did not include that. We think that that's something that should be done, maybe with the background of the current person who works within your human resources, taking a look at what other school districts or what might be recommended by OSHA, such things as should be able to lift 50 pounds, should be able to do things like that. We didn't get specific, and it may be that your legal counsel thinks you should, especially in a job that has the potential that someone might get hurt, whether it's straining a back or doing something. We didn't get that specific. We think that's something that is almost the next step. And since Dr. Nash was working in her area in special ed, we did not deal with the special ed people in our report. So we gave you a list of all of the jobs that we took a look at, and we met with people who represent all of these jobs. There are two notations next to some of the jobs, sometimes one, sometimes none, sometimes two, which would indicate that first, if there's an asterisk, that would mean that there's a change in the job title. And if there's a hashtag, that would mean that in the future, not necessarily for this year's budget, but in the future, the new superintendent should sit down and talk about whether or not the salary for that particular job was still valid or whether it needed to be increased. We make no recommendations in some cases on what the salaries would be. That would be something that you will have to discuss either with Christine or your new superintendent who's coming in.
You want to mention which positions?
Those positions would be the changing of the human resource job to a coordinator's position, the discussion of the salary, and I know Christine may be getting involved with this, would be with if you decide to move with an assistant superintendent of schools. And the one that's on there that I did not put down would be, and it should have been, it would be whether or not you choose in the future to move toward a coordinator of building and grounds. So the two of the goals of the project were to come up with a chart that would limit the number of staff that report on a daily basis to the superintendent. Currently, a number of people walk through the superintendent's door to get a yes or a no. And in some cases, some of those people could be handled at another level. So our job was to sort of clean that up. The second goal was to create organizational chart that we feel would enhance communication. And that's what our goals were when we decided on what those charts might look like. So in your packet, you'll see that there are two charts. The first chart does the one thing. It does reduce the number of direct reports to the superintendent. It primarily puts 4 central office people in direct line with the superintendent. Also note too that the superintendent also interacts and in this case is responsible for the building principals.
Can I just comment on it?
Yep.
On the principals, one of the things, our suggestion is that when they have an issue with buildings, when they have an issue with budget or whatever, go to the finance director. Special ed, director of curriculum, or if it's assistant super, to go to those people on a day-to-day basis. On personnel, that's a major part, the principals would deal with the superintendent directly, that's your big thing that would happen there. But again, it's the day-to-day operations that they can, as Paul said, they can take care of with it, and the superintendent doesn't have to be involved with those. Be informed, but that's what they have to do and take care of it that way. So, but again, principals would have a direct line, and then also would mention evaluations. The superintendent would evaluate those 4 positions plus your 7 principals. So it'd be 11 positions that he would evaluate directly.
The second chart, when we get to the charts, identifies the assistant superintendent in a different level, and in our minds solves 2 issues. One is who's in charge when the superintendent is not in the district, and that clearly becomes the responsibility of the assistant superintendent. Ironically, on a personal note, I just became the interim assistant superintendent in Cromwell, Connecticut. I won't go through how I got there, but I'm there. The superintendent was gone today, and his secretary sent out a message, if there's a problem, Dr. Gaducci is in charge. That would not necessarily happen here. So there's something that, at least from an organizational point, is something that you need to consider heavily. The second thing is that curriculum really is one of the driving forces in any school district, and the way we are set up here in Dudley-Charlton now, there needs to be more of a leadership role in the person in charge of curriculum, and that's what happens if you decide to go with an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. So in our opinion, the issue of succession and the issue of curriculum leadership are solved by selecting an assistant superintendent of schools. So if I just might get up. So these charts are relatively easy. If there's a dotted line, that dotted line really refers to communication. So there are straight lines that come down from you on top as the school committee to the superintendent of school, and then there's the four main positions we talked about, and then the building principals. But as Steve mentioned, the dotted lines go through all of those 4 main positions. So the thought would be that the building principals have an issue with curriculum, they don't go to the superintendent, they go here. If they have an issue with technology, they go here. But if they have an issue, as Steve said, with personnel, they're going to go to the superintendent of schools. And then all of the positions that go under them. And we selected only I might as well stay here for the second chart. We only selected what we considered to be the positions that we designed the job descriptions for. There could be other positions. We only focused on the positions that we were asked to do. In the second chart, now you see how that changes. Again, now you have an assistant superintendent, and there's more of a direct line to the building principals because of the curriculum issue. We still recommend the dotted line across, which is, in our minds, the curriculum line. The superintendent is still talking, however, to the director of finance, technology, and student services, and the building principal. So there's a little bit of a change there, but again, in our minds, clarifying who reports to who, and the need to communicate, and the need to focus on specific job tasks and job responsibilities.
Can I comment?
Pardon?
Can I comment?
Yep.
One of the positions, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to it or not, but one of the things is you have the benefits coordinator, and we're recommending it become a human service, HR.
That's the next chart.
Yeah, no, I want to go, the HR person will go to the next one. And I just want to jump to that one because one of the things that when we met with people, when you have personnel coming up, they seem to bounce around to different people in the central office. If you had one person they go to get all the information when they're hiring, when they're leaving, or whatever they need, they know one place to go. And so that's why we'd recommend an HR. Right now, you do have a person that's very skilled in that and became an HR director, HR coordinator, whatever title you want to give with it. And that's one of the other things we saw that would need to be done, as well as all the federal and state laws that you got to be in compliance with, that person be responsible for. Again, that would be an increase in salary that you look at, as well as you have to deal with an increase on the assistant superintendent position. So, Bob, go ahead.
So, of the four positions, or four major recommendations would be from our position. And again, our job is just to recommend, and our job is to give you our insight from what we saw, and your job is to decide whether you like it, don't like it, want to accept it or not. That's your job. So we would recommend that you give serious consideration to advancing the director of curriculum position up to assistant superintendent level. And again, I want to say that we're not talking specifically about a certain person. We're just talking about the position itself. Steve just mentioned the fact that the whole issue of human resources has become more and more complicated, especially in the last 10 or 15 years with all of the changes in healthcare, whether or not it gets thrown out by the current administration and a new system comes in. It does require a lot of coordination, and we feel as though that in your district right now, you would be better served by having someone who's in a coordinated position. The third recommendation is that we understand that the current head custodian at Shepherd Hill is maybe retiring soon, and we would have you take a strong look at coordinator of building and grounds, adding that. And we do that in order to, I think, become more effective and efficient. Now, when I say that, I want to tell you, your current building head custodians was one of the most enthusiastic, dedicated group of people I've talked to in a long, long time. Clearly, these guys like what they do, and they're so proud of what they do.
They've heard me say that
And
numerous times.
so
It's nice to have someone else say it.
I just want to tell you that they were just great. And having said that, they were a little bit skeptical when I talked about, what do you think about a building and grounds person? And so in my mind, I think that you could draw that position, in effect, to give Rich some support in terms of how the budget works for each of the schools. Do you have redundancy? Can you be more effective? Not that you're going to get these people because they're already doing a great job for you, but there may be some savings. There may be a way to have the coordination a little better than it is now. And so that would be something to take a look at. But when I say that, I want to go back and say it again. It is certainly not a reflection on the great job that the men who are currently doing those jobs are doing for you people. And the last thing is, you do have a position that we found to be very interesting or unique, in that you had a position that had two very separate kind of tasks. And one position, the district data specialist, is very crucial because that person inputs all the data that goes to the state and federal government that ends up being your reimbursement numbers. And currently that person not only does that job, but also does the registrar of new students. And one job takes away from the other. And so our recommendation would be to take a look at finding someone who might come in on a part-time basis, to be determined by you people, whether that's 10 hours a week or whether it's seasonal, but to, in the minimum, assist that person with the whole registrar process. The two jobs just don't seem to didn't jive for us. And so that's something we think you ought to take a look at and how to solve that problem. But clearly, the district data specialist is someone who's extremely, extremely important to the district. And you've got to have someone who knows what they're doing, and not an easy job to fill, which I understand has been tried twice and has not done that. You have not been that successful, and the person who was asked to come back and do it, because it's a very, very demanding and technical job. Want to say something on that, too?
Yeah, I think the registrar can be up and down depending what time of year, and one of the things that you want to do is have one person registering all the students. Well, you've got like 250, 260 coming in, that you're going to meet with the parents and go through that. It takes a long time to do that, and it's a personal touch that you want to have, and that for a number of parents in kindergarten or first grade coming in, that's one of the first things that they're going to have contact with your district. We want to make that as smooth as possible. The data specialist, when I worked at Narragansett, she was full-time just dealing with all the data we had to deal with and collecting material and getting it in, and then the DESC would call back and say, well, this isn't right or whatever, doing that. So, as Paul said, the data that goes in, it's important that it go in correctly, that you have it. So, I mean, that's again, something for you to take a look at with those. These are the recommendations we saw. We spent 3 days down here talking with staff, and you see in our 52-page report, that everybody was very helpful, and we enjoyed talking with them, and I think we listened to what they were saying. So, again, you've got to realize Paul and I both have been superintendents probably 25 years between the two of us. So we, in central offices and regions, so we definitely understand the operations with that.
25 years apiece.
Apiece, okay, 25 years apiece, 50 years.
Or
so,
more.
Yeah. The next part is the operational suggestions. And
So I don't want to be too redundant, because some of those I've already mentioned, but I will highlight some that would be new. So in doing all of what we did, we saw some things that we thought we should at least bring to the table. First would be that there's a suggestion to take a look at your business operations software. The next would be
already mentioned.
the whole issue of the backup. So I would go down to bullet number 4. So currently, as I think I mentioned this one of the meetings we were at before, if someone is out, and in most cases, people doing some very important tasks, there's no one who knows how to do that job if that person is out. So our recommendation is that the superintendent and the business director of finance and operations identify those tasks that need to be replicated by another person, and then begin the training so that that can be done.
It's called cross-training between positions so that they can do that if they're out.
We also took a look at 2 issues that came up that we just wanted to mention to you, and that is, in your budget, which you discussed tonight, you have a fairly heavily reliance on 2 revenue streams that are sensitive, to say the least. One is school choice, and the other one is the use of E&D. In my experience, when I came into Hampton-Wilbraham, in my second year, I always had great school committees, but I had 3 of the school committee members had received a lot of concern from the public that we were using too many school choice. And in 1 year, they accepted 0. And you can imagine what that did to our budget. And then it took me 3 years to bring some of those school choice numbers back in, because it was so critical to the budget. I think you need to take a look at that, and I think you need to have a discussion with your 2 communities, but that's something that you have to decide. And the second thing is your E&D. And E&D is designed primarily for emergencies, and you have a tendency to rely on it as a revenue stream, and I think you need to be careful about that, because all you have to do in 1 year is run into a boiler, 2 or 3, and I don't say this in any disparaging way, but 2 or 3 students who require extremely high sensitive educational plans, and your E&D will dry up in no time. And then you're going to be in a real issue in terms of what that means to the 2 communities. So you need to sort of think about a long-term strategy, in our opinion, on both of those things. And finally, we didn't visit all of the buildings, but we always think it's a good idea to take a look at the safety, to conduct a safety audit. Your local police departments are, and the state police are very good about that, and we would recommend that you take a look at your safety procedures in all of your schools to see if they are equal to other school districts around you or throughout Massachusetts, and make some decisions relative to that. In the short time we were here, Steve and I walked around the building one day without any identification of who we were. And I'm not blaming the administration here, but there should be, that should not have happened. And we both realized it, and we took care of it the next time we came. We said, make sure that you give us some kind of badge, so kids will know that, you know, that we're here, and staff would know that we're here. But I think in general, you need to take a look at, as just good practice. Every 3 or 4 years, you should take a look at, are we doing what we need to do to protect our kids while they're in our schools? So that's our other recommendation.
We were walking around in coat and tie, so they thought we looked official.
We thought we looked good.
But that's why we insisted the next time, and Sandy gave us badges, so.
So that's our work, and we're certainly willing to respond to any questions. As Steve mentioned, if the new superintendent, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, if he wishes to have us come and talk to him someday, that would be great. We certainly would do that as well, so.
And we are putting this on our next agenda because there's a lot to digest. And so we have a long meeting tonight, so our discussions will be at our next meeting. And if you have any questions, maybe we can invite you back if we have questions for you, or if we're going to discuss it ourselves.
Certainly, if any, between now and the next meeting, if any of the members have specific questions you'd like me to direct to them, you can email them to me, and I will get in touch with the gentleman, and we can find answers if there's something in the report.
So thank you. Thank you for your report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A lot of information.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It was my recommendation, actually, that you get this evening, digest it. We need to come back. There is some urgency, as you know, because if the committee makes a decision to move forward with, in particular, the assistant superintendent position, we do have an individual filling as an interim curriculum director, and that has a domino effect. So if that were going to be something that the committee was going to move forward with for next year, we'd want to make that decision sooner than later. So that's all.
Okay. So the capital plan study presentation is going to be at 8. They're not here, so we'll skip that and come back to it. Director of Finance and Operations report, and that's Rich, okay?
Thank you very much. A few donations for the committee to choose to accept this evening. Mason Road School has received a donation of $16.39 from Squad Locker. The Heritage School has received a donation of $50 from a parent to apply to lunch deficit balances of needy families. Charlton Middle School has received a donation of $200 from Mrs. Mary Jane Pieve. And the Charlton Elementary School received a donation of $120.50 from Planet Aid.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve and accept the donations that Rich has just set forth for us.
So move.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. The other 2 items I have on my report are listed on the agenda separately,
Okay.
the health insurance and the FY20 budget. So
Okay.
I think that's all I have this
All
evening.
right, thank you so much. Budget and Finance Subcommittee, and that's Elaine.
The Budget and Finance Subcommittee met yesterday. And there are some items that we discussed that are on the agenda that will be discussed later. One of the main focuses of conversation yesterday was regarding the debt that has been incurred this year regarding our school lunch accounts. We spent over an hour with Mr. Greenberg, who's our food services director. This was the second presentation that he had made. When he'd come the first time, we had asked him to follow up with some statistical information for us. So it's extremely disturbing that the lunch account negative balance year-to-date so far for this school year is $29,896.
And that's just for this school year?
This school year,
It's
September.
not
No,
accumulated for 5 years?
This is September 1st to Monday.
Okay.
Was $29,896.79. Since 2015 was $6,624.33. 2016, it went up to $14,244.65. 2017, it was $13,138.72. In 2018, it went up to $20,509.37.
And none of that was ever collected? We paid it out of our own
Yes,
general
so
fund?
what happens is at the end of the school year, that account has to be zeroed out.
Zero, right.
So that money is coming out of our general fund. So far, our general fund has lost $84,413.86 in unrecovered school lunch debt.
But
So-
we've been making money in the revolving account.
So
We cannot by law take out any money to pay for the school lunches, so that's why it comes out of the general fund. But we are making money in the food service.
Yes, and that law changed in 2015.
Right.
So where I want to go with this is in relation to some of the statistics that were presented. So currently, 48% of our students have negative balances. That's 1,841 students have negative balances. Since August, there have been 922 letters sent home, as well as 1,613 emails since the beginning of September, and this is just for Shepherd Hill. There's been $488 in postage, and Mr. Greenberg estimated the cost of labor between himself and one of his staff members, which is approximately 17 and a half hours a week, is focused on trying to recover debt. So what I want to just bring to your attention is what we looked at statistically. Half of our debt is at Shepherd Hill High School, $14,657.83. Both of the middle schools were approximately in the $6,000 range. The upper elementary schools were averaged $2,500. Mason Road was $809, and I have to give compliments to Mrs. Pacheco and Mrs. LeBlanc, because Charlton Elementary School only has $81.35 in debt. So congratulations to you and your staff for doing a great job. Mr. Greenberg has been in touch with many districts across the area talking about lunch debt, and some of the comparatives that were presented to us is that we have 10 districts that he accounted for that combined, all 10 districts only have $17,000 in debt, and we have $29,000. And one of the comparatives that we use is the Wachusett School District. So Wachusett, which has 7,800 students, has a total debt of $1,250. So our discussion with Mr. Greenberg focused on our current lunch policy. So we've made two recommendations. One is that the policy for the lunch account will be put on the agenda for policy subcommittee to look at, to bring back to you. And the other was to implement the policy that we have. So one of the communications that Mr. Greenberg has had with our very senior, experienced, have been in the district for a very long time staff is that there is no teeth in what we're doing because we're not implementing our policy. So currently our policy allows us to take action on negative accounts, and there was quite a description of the many attempts, even principals that have been dodged even with personal visits to home, that Mr. Greenberg is now going forward with. So we will Between now and the end of the month, he is sending out letters to all of the accounts with negative balances to let them know that they're a negative balance. And we're moving forward with either collection or small claims court. So he's going to do them in tiers. $175 and up will be in the first 3 weeks, then they'll be moving to $125 up and $75 and up. There are accounts that are $400, $600 in arrears. And when you're looking at the average cost of lunch, that is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months of delinquency. So I know that our principals and our lunch staff do an incredible job recognizing families that are truly in need and helping those out. The case that Mr. Greenberg presented is that it's not families that are in need, it's families that choose not to pay. And that's a substantial amount of money. He averaged that it was $2,800 a month between labor cost for him and his staff member to chase negative accounts. And over the course of the year, that's $25,000 of redirected labor cost to try and collect debt. So between the $84,000, he's projecting that we're going to be in a negative balance by the end of the year between $35,000 and $40,000 and $25,000 in labor costs trying to recover that money.
So I have a question, Rich. Have we reevaluated any schools eligible yet for free lunch, the whole school?
The application process, as you know, Mason Road School was close last year but did not qualify.
Right.
This year, we've received notification that Mason Road and Dudley Elementary are close.
Oh.
However, the state's notification of close,
They
we were kind of far off when we actually went through the process last year for Mason Road.
Right.
So while Mason Road numbers probably have climbed from where they were last year, I'm not sure they're going to meet the standard of 40%, and I'm willing to bet that Dudley Elementary is going to be as far off as Mason Road was this year. But that's, maybe the state's refined how it looks at this.
Okay. But you'll keep on that, too?
If we can provide free lunches for
everyone.
For everyone
That's my
through the
goal.
community eligibility program, we absolutely will.
I don't know if anyone has any questions on that particular topic.
But in our policy, just refresh my memory, do we have, to go to small claims court?
Right, so the policy under deficit accounts, the last statement is, if the balance continues to escalate, and if there are no mitigating factors, and the parents' guardians have not made any payments in an effort to reduce the negative balance, or fails to bring the student's account into good standing, parentheses, having a zero or positive balance, within 14 days of the first deficit notice, the administration will deem the account delinquent and may take legal action for payment.
Right, and I know I voted against anyway, this policy, because I'm hoping that we can give everyone lunch and not worry about them having to pay. But that's my philosophy.
I'm incredibly disturbed to hear that these aren't the families in need, that these are the families that have the ability to pay, and we are spending this much labor cost, not to mention that we're working in this much of a deficit. Can you tell me the number of students that this is, again, because I don't think I wrote that.
Well, it's 48% of our student body, which is 3,800 students.
It's fine, I just wanted to-
So there's 1,841 students that have a negative balance.
Yes.
And half of it is at Shepherd Hill.
The money factor, half of it is at Shepherd Hill. And what he is encountering when he's talking to families is that they're saying that they're sending money in with their students, and students are not bringing it to the proper people to pay on the account.
But
So,
it's an online process, at least it is for the elementary school, that as a parent, you would go in and you would put the money right into that account.
if your parent chooses to do that, some parents still, if they don't have access, are sending in money or sending in checks. I want to kind of, Mr. Greenberg is available to come into a full school committee to reiterate this. I just want to say this is the second meeting that we've had in budget and finance on this topic, and we spent over an hour on this conversation last week discussing all the possibilities of doing this and him giving a very full description of the efforts made. And it's really pretty disturbing, families having $400, $500, $600 in debt.
I think you said one person had 1,000.
Yes,
three
there was a
kids,
family that has
one
$1,000 in debt.
And another kid was listed as homeless. He was only homeless because, excuse me, a house was being built, and it slipped out one day, we're moving to our new house, so he gave himself away, but he was listed as homeless, and therefore,
Right.
they were, when he was building a new
So-
house.
And I also would like to, there's certainly been times where I haven't gone into the account and missed, and my
Sure.
child is bought or whatever, so I've been delinquent, not on purpose, but with a couple of
Well,
dollars. Does
you're-
that count
You're
towards
not,
this?
you're not the person that we're talking about.
I understand that, I just wanna know, when I'm looking
After
at this
10 lunches.
number,
After
does
10
that,
lunches.
I'm sorry?
It's after 10 lunches, is right.
So this 1,841 is not until you're 10 lunches
Correct.
behind.
In the rear.
So
So
our
this is
policy-
this is a legit, I was trying to get.
Right.
Are we counting the people that just miss
No,
once
no,
or-
no, no. This is, the policy is that we don't deny a student lunch under any circumstances, but after 10 lunches, you go into deficit negative account.
Okay, I just
Okay.
wanted to know how real that number is, and it sounds
It's
very
very
real.
real.
Yeah.
It's very, and it, I mean, the startling, and this presentation is available, Sandy has it, and she will distribute it to all of you. But the really disturbing factor to this is that the account has quadrupled in 4 years. So if you go from $6,600 to almost $30,000 in 4 years, it's
That's
quadrupled.
why I thought it was accumulative,
No.
because I know we always add
No.
around $6,000.
I think he, Richard, maybe you can help me with the number. I think that it was a very small number, that he only collected $4,200 on a $20,000, approximately $20,000 debt carried over from last year. So once it's zeroed out, the possibility of collecting it, and even it's accumulating, is very difficult. So the only thing we're doing right now is we've given him direction to implement the policy that we have in place. And then when Mrs. Antossi and I meet on policy, we'll see whether or not there's any language that needs to be changed on the policy. So aside from that, it was just the topics that I know are further on the agenda regarding, the capital planning, the budget, and school choice.
And that concludes your report.
It does.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Any other questions for Elaine? Okay, that brings us up to final vote for FY 2020 budget. So we have two options here, and I know we did go with option one. Are there any suggestions after our March 20th meeting? Are we going to stick with this one, or are we going to go to option two? What is our final budget?
Can I request, before we put that out there, can we have a very brief summary of the March 20th meeting for those that were not able to attend?
Okay, thank you. Christie, you were there. Do you want to give the summary of the?
Would you like me to give a
Yes,
summary?
yes, because
It can be very brief, but I
Yeah,
was just
sure.
hoping to understand.
Yes, so.
Kathy and I were there, so we heard
I think the committee received the PowerPoint. We did not do a PowerPoint presentation. This was a meeting of all of the boards to have discussion, I think, around the state of finances, both from a town's perspective and also, in our case, from a regional school district perspective. I did a quick overview, if you will, of the budget, primarily concerned with the fact that this district, on an annual basis, just to stay even, needs a 3% increase annually. Annually, I say that. To no surprise, Mark Abrams, in his report in 2017, indicated that as a way of maintaining a level services budget. And he actually showed the 5-year increase of what it would look like from FY19 to FY23. So we repeated that, I think, a number of times, indicating also that the school committee had asked us, the district administrative team, to build a budget that was a level services budget, which simply means that when you open the doors in the following year, you don't lay off people, you have the same level of services with respect to programs and personnel. While you may reorganize positions, you are not cutting positions, you are not cutting instructional resources and any other services. We presented that. We presented the current projections with respect to enrollments and the fact that this district has been able to maintain what I would consider to be good class sizes, and the impact of that going forward if, after the override monies are gone, which is a 2-year override, lest we forget, not a 3-year override, although there are some differences in opinions on that. But one just needs to look at the Abrams report and see that a 3% increase starts out somewhere between $1.2 million and ends up at $1.5 million, a little under $1.5 million in FY23. So if you do the math, and you were looking for a 3-year override at $1.5 million, that would be $4.5 million the last time I checked. So $3 million gets you 2 years. So it gets you through FY19 and FY20. And after that, the concern that I have is what happens to the culture of this district? What happens to the people and the morale if you don't support schools where they should be? For us, it needs to be minimum services. Minimum services is a level services budget, not a level funded budget. And that's the question, and that's the elephant in the room, and I really don't feel that that was discussed. And so I think I would behoove the committee and really urge the committee that we need to set up some meetings to have that discussion. I don't have the answer. Both towns have indicated that they have fixed amounts of money. We recognize that, but we have to have that serious discussion about what are the next steps. I can tell you the next steps. As I said very clearly, I came from a district for 7 years. This is the first year as a superintendent. I've not had to have reductions in staff. In my 10 years as a superintendent, this is the very first year. I've not had to sit and say, we're laying off staff. That will happen because although the override has helped you for a period of time, it is not the permanent solution. And that's the serious discussion, in my opinion, that needs to happen. I think they listened, and they were very cognizant of what we said, but I don't feel that probably we got at least what I felt might have been some two-way discussions, and maybe that needs to come in a smaller forum for us to be able to have those discussions. Each town is very different with respect to their funding, with respect to their needs, with respect to where they're going, projects that they may have in the wings, if you will. But I still think we have to strongly advocate that the override, again, I don't care if it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever, it is not going to solve the long-term problem in this school district. If you need $1.5 million to open your doors every year with the people, and you don't get that, and you're only getting $600,000 or $700,000 in a good year, you will be laying off people every year. That is the reality. 80% of your budget is personnel. In every school district in the state of Massachusetts, we deal with this. This is the same ongoing challenge. There isn't a definitive answer. I don't have a solution, but I think we need to engage in that conversations in the future. And that's what I would hope that the committee and your discussions would say, this is our next step.
And I just want to relay this message. The two town administrators, remember we had two options on our budget, and it wasn't going to change the bottom line. And Kathy and I had voted against option one. And the two town administrators said we promised that we were going to level fund it, like we said, and they said they're not going to pay it. It isn't going to happen. So I don't know if you guys want to go with the option two now or stick with option one. Kathy, you know that because you talked to them and I did. And both towns said it's not going to happen. Elaine.
Just a comment in my perspective of having been at the meeting and having been involved in the 2-year process with this. There is a discrepancy with some people who felt that it was a 3-year override versus a 2-year override. We've been working all along. In the early days, we looked at a 3-year override that was going to average between $4.5 to $5 million. We knew that wasn't affordable. We knew that wasn't possible to do. So we moved it down to a 2-year override at $3 million because we know we need $1.5 million for these 2 years. What's disappointing to me is, despite 2 years of conversation, despite not only the district doing its own study on the fiscal health going forward, but Charlton contracting Mark Abrams to do a third-party study that we then supplemented to be even more extensive, and had many conversations and sat down, and this information has been in the hands of both towns, that at our meeting, there was no conversation about the cliff that's ahead of us moving forward. So what we've heard is that we can't afford it, but what we didn't have was a conversation of how we go forward in the future. And that's really to Dr. Nash's point. The meeting ended without even moving forward. So beyond this year, there is nothing in consideration on the towns as to how they're going to address this fiscal issue, other than we just can't afford it. It isn't going to go away. Additionally, both towns are moving forward with capital projects, and the needs of the school district are not in their pipeline of consideration. What we need for our aging buildings, what possibly could happen if the high school SOI is approved. We're not in the pipeline of their consideration. So they're moving forward with debt exclusions in Charlton. They've just done one recently in Dudley, and we have not had the conversation about going forward with what would be necessary in the district. So for me, it was a part one conversation, and we need to have a part two conversation.
Okay, Rich, what are you recommending for our budget?
Well, having sat through one or two meetings last year in discussing the override, in having sat through a lot of the, or all of the planning, and last week's meeting, you know, we did say that we were going to try to live within our means. So, you know, if push comes to shove and and you asked me for a recommendation, I think recommendation number 2 is the appropriate thing to do. Unfortunately, we don't have House numbers yet. Unfortunately, we don't have Senate numbers yet. Unfortunately, they've stopped the process of having a joint resolution to provide budget certainty to communities as we do our planning. Last year, the budget was approved sometime late in July. That makes management tough when you can't make good sound judgment on what final things are going to look like. Everything that we have right now, our revenues are based on the governor's budget, and, you know, we don't know what the House is going to look like. If the House were to step in and provide us with $50 or $60 per student, all of a sudden there's an influx of revenue. And if they do that and it's finalized before June 30th, then we can make some adjustments to our revenue budget. Unfortunately, if it goes past June 30th, we're locked into where we are. So it's challenging, especially when the state leaders talk about recognizing our issues, but still can't ever get to the point where they can say, this is an absolute guarantee. Even if it goes up, that's okay, but just give us an absolute guarantee early on in the process.
Thank you, Rich.
I think the point was the recommendation number 2.
Right.
Just again, to reiterate to the committee, moving forward with the recommendation 2 means that that $149,000 will be borne out of, at this point in time, we would be looking at taking it out of circuit breaker and E&D, with the hopes that moving forward, there might be some shifts within, but just be aware of that. Okay.
All right, so I will give you the number, and Rich, I hope it's right, I've circled it. And so the bottom line for our budget, and then we'll read the assessments, is $50,006,069. That's option 2. That is our budget. And the assessments are, and Charlton net assessment will be $13,489,957, and Dudley's assessment will be $8,780,840, and that gives us a total district assessments of $22,270,797. So I will entertain a motion to approve the budget that, and the figures that I have just read.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, I have a second. Any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so we have 4, and 3 opposed, am I right? Okay.
Don't you need 2/3?
Oh, we need 5 for for this budget, 5
You
votes.
think that's the budget?
So
You need two-thirds of.
we need
5 people.
two-thirds for the budget to go through, 5 votes. Anyone?
Can I put it up for reconsideration? How do you do that?
The amount hasn't changed. It's the whether or not the $149,000 is being borne by the
Right,
district or the
right.
$149,000
We
is
already
being borne
heard
by
from the
by
towns administrators on March 20th, so there'll be a fight there
I-
for the 149. My opinion, I don't think it's worth it. We did promise, but Stephanie said she's going to
I'll
vote
switch
for
it.
it.
I don't, only, so that way the budget can be passed.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm not, where we're gonna find it, where we're taking it from, we keep taking, and that's
Right.
what we've been
Right.
doing for years, and that's why I said
And
I will
I-
change it.
And Stephanie, I agree, but the only thing is, we had said this to the towns, and so we went back on our word by trying to get $149,000 more from them.
I have to disagree that we went back on our word, and I know I wasn't sitting on this committee, but we didn't go back on our word. We went back to them and said, we have done the very best we can to provide the best
Right.
school system for our students. And this is how much that costs to do so. And it's not a lot of money that we are coming back to sit to you and say, in the budget of a $50 million budget, we are coming back with $149,000 that is above where we were expected to come in at.
But this is because we passed the override.
I understand
And
that,
so
but we
that's
have
your
not-
opinion. My opinion, we went back on our word.
Okay.
We said we were going to level fund it. If we got this override through, we made a promise to the citizens.
May I make a point, Mrs. O'Coin?
Go ahead.
The $149,000 is for 3 positions that we need for legal compliance. So we haven't technically gone back on our word. We made a budget based on that. We have 3 positions that we have to fill to be legally compliant, 2 special education positions and the ELL position. So I don't think it's being fiscally irresponsible. It's not that we decided to go out and spend money on something that wasn't required. We've been very thoughtful about that. I agree with the budget amount, and I agree that the $149,000 can shift based on, in a month from now, we can see where this is going through the House. There has been a very strong push. The education hearing has never happened this early. There is a very strong push for 100% reimbursement on regional transportation. Okay, there is a very strong effort on that. If the regional transportation moves 10%, 15%, that's money that comes in that reduces that $149,000. So the concern that I have, and I know the towns would like some certainty to it, but I would still like some flexibility to, shift that amount. So if it came back down to the towns and you were looking for $5,000 from Dudley and you're looking for $20,000 from Charlton, is that not possible to ask? I'm very concerned, and I've listened to Charlton FinCom meetings, I've listened to Board of Selectmen meetings. Charlton is in a much healthier fiscal state than Dudley is. But we are putting ourselves in a very dangerous position to go into next year with between $300,000 to $400,000 in E&D based on our aging buildings and based on the fact that we got hit last spring with a large expense. It's really, we're going to be in a situation that we could be facing something we will have no money for. And what do you do in the middle of a school year when you don't have any money to fix something?
Anyone else, Kathy?
Well, first of all, I think we are going back on our road, because we said for 2 years we would assess them level funded. And whether you want to split hairs on how that is presented, that's what my feeling was. This is the budget. We're asking for the same amount for 2 years, plus it's gone down because of the capital plan. So if you look at the numbers, they don't look right because the capital amount is out of there. So if you think it's a negative amount, that's because of capital. So if you look at these figures, you might say, how come it's, but that's another
Right.
story, because the capital debt is paid off. As far as the 3 mandated position, someone with the town would say, cut 3 other teachers in. That's what you can do. That's what they would say. We were told point blank from our administrator, who has been more than supportive through the years, we were not going to get the money.
Mrs. Caballo, in all due respect, I understand that.
I know.
And I'm just trying to leave some flexibility for us so that we can still move through another month and turn around and change which direction the assessments go in. Town meeting isn't until May 20th. We have 3 meetings before that we can make that shift and reduce that money to the towns. I don't disagree that we want to try and do that as much as possible, but unfortunately, because of timing, our budget has to be done so early, and it doesn't leave us that certainty. You know, I don't want to split hairs either, but one of the things that we talked about with the towns was replacing the debt exclusion that was coming off the books to be able to move forward with the roofs for both middle schools. And because of what happened in both towns regarding the tax bills in December, we've decided to hold off on very necessary work on our roofs in consideration of the taxpayers. So, you know, that was the plan, and that was the conversation all along that we've been having, is that the debt exclusion, we were just going to move forward. It was a very minimal impact, but in trying to recognize what that impact was with taxpayers, we decided to hold off, and that's the reason why we're going into the capital plan study. You know, if need be in 3 weeks that we need to absorb that money, I have no problem doing that. But I would like a little bit more flexibility with time. We can always change our recommendation at the end of April.
We
and
have
shift
a
it.
budget though now, final budget. Anyone else now? Okay, any more discussion on it?
I just want to say, to clear one thing up, I never agreed to say that money that came off of the buildings was going to go immediately. I've mentioned that many times in the budget meeting. I said we should not be saying we're going to use it immediately for something new. We had to give the towns a couple of years break. I have gone on record for that 100 times. We never took a vote on that, so I just want that out there. I never said we should turn that money around immediately, but that's another issue.
Okay, so we're
I'll make a
in-
motion to reconsider the vote.
Right, okay, do I have a second on reconsideration?
Second.
Okay? Any more discussion on it? No? Okay, all in favor? Okay, we have a budget.
I
Fine.
make a motion we accept the budget for recommendation number 2.
Yeah, option 2.
The vote was 5-2.
5-2.
For
2
recommendation 2.
against, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Our 8 o'clock presenters are here.
Oh, all right, so that's what we'll do now. Okay, we're going to go back to B, capital plan study presentation. And you can introduce them if you want. Sure.
So this evening, we're joined by Jim Barnett and his team from DRA, Drummy, Roseanne, and Anderson, and I know I mispronounced 2 of those names, I'm sure. These folks are experts in educational facility planning and assessment. And what the Budget and Finance Subcommittee has done is meet with them, was it?
The
about-
20th, February.
Yeah, oh, that's right, it was during the February break. So approximately a month ago, to see how they approach developing a capital plan with possibly including educational planning in that capital plan in a district this size. So I'd invite them forward as they're getting settled in to join us and do the presentation.
How do you do?
Good evening. Yes. Thanks for having us in this evening. As Rich indicated a few weeks ago, we had an opportunity to sit with Dr. Nash, Rich, and a couple representatives of the group here. And we're invited back to have a conversation and a discussion around facility study and master planning for the regional school system. So we very much are prepared for a discussion, so please, if you have questions as we move forward, or if you have particular concerns or areas of interest, by all means, let us know that. We're happy to have that discussion and conversation as we move forward through this. This is going to be a little unusual conversation because we're here and that's there, and it's kind of a back and forth. But before we start into the presentation, guys, why don't you guys self-introduce here?
Sure, I'm Greg Smalley. I'm the Senior Project Manager with DRA. I'm John Tyndall Gibson. I do education planning and programming with DRA.
And I'm Jim Barrett, principal with Drumero Zane Anderson. I guess right out of the gate, I'm curious, does anybody have any particular questions, comments, or concerns relative to master planning throughout the district, or strategic planning, or facility study planning?
I'll listen to you first.
Okay, fair enough. Well, our experience in working with communities like yours is that, you know, there are three keys typically to project success. It's the ability to find the right kind of team to work with, somebody who has specific experience in this type of work, that team carry with it the right type of process, and that they carry the right sets of experiences to come to bear on your specific needs. In terms of our firm, we're established in 1923. We just celebrated our 95th anniversary. And with that, over the last 60 years, we've really focused on educational planning, programming, and design work for communities like yours. One thing that we'd like to say is that we have a unique commitment to community participation, and that's particularly important in regional school system work, and that's something that we've come to learn. This is a partial listing of what I used to call our last 10 years. I haven't updated it in a while, but this is a partial listing going back to 2007. So we have significant experience around planning, study work, strategic planning for districts like yours. And as we look at your system, you know, certainly the thing that comes to bear in our mind is the fact that we are dealing with a regional school system. So certainly centralized clusters of educational facilities within each community with the shared Shepherd Hill Regional High School. The type of team, you've met three of us, but also this type of study, we employ landscape architects, demographers and enrollment specialists, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection engineers to come to understand your buildings. One discipline not shown here is cost estimating, and that's a very significant kind of portion of being able to bring to the table not only here's an idea relative to one of a series of options, and here's how it performs educationally. Here's how it can perform physically. Here's what it means from a physical plant standpoint. But also, here's what it means dollars and cents wise. So you can weigh out decisions as we move throughout the process. So when we do our work well, our clients speak on our behalf. I chose this particular quote from a former chairman of a board of ed because it was a regional school system that we were serving. This particular regional school system hadn't successfully voted a referenda in over 15 years at the point we took on that work. Over a 6-month period, we came to lead them to a place and work with them closely to be able to garner support in all 3 towns for a favorable support of that particular referendum. So why do we believe in this kind of process? It's because if you think of a typical construction project, a design bid build effort, and that's that bell-shaped curve that you see up on the screen, across the bottom are the various phases of the work: schematic design, design development, construction documentation. The point where you get the greatest work effort from a full team, inclusive of all disciplines, is at about the midpoint of that process. And we know 2 things about construction. The first, your ability to impact outcomes over time decreases. Secondly, cost for change increases over that same time frame. So in doing work like this, early planning efforts, the opportunity is to try to push that bell curve backwards and try to take advantage of this opportunity, greater impact in pre-planning, to take advantage of reduction of cost kind of exposure as you move forward. So I think everybody in the back of the audience can read this clearly. This is a sample. We just gave a sample of what a outline work plan would look like for our team. And you'll see it's across about a 5-month period. We answered this question with the group we met with. Typically, these studies, we recommend about a 5 or a 6-month window. We can do them as quickly as 3 months, but we caution folks that it often takes time to digest information, think about it, and be able to respond to the planning team to move on to next steps. So that is the reason for suggesting that kind of time frame. These colored bars that you see moving, these are the major steps of the process, the act of collecting, listening, visioning, and ultimately documentation, and a series of steps by all team members necessary in each area. And that's that process that I just touched on. We're going to talk a little bit, what do we mean by collecting?
So with collecting, what we're trying to do is make sure that we understand and know everything that you know in the various pieces of the district. So not just buildings and what do you own for square foot wise, but how's your curriculum developing? Where might that be going? What's your population doing? And then what's it cost you to own the buildings, and how appropriate might they be for where your education is going to be in 5 or 10 years? And exactly. Listening involves talking to a lot of people. We like to get out and touch people in all different parts of the community, parents, students, of course, staff, the faculty at the schools, the administrators, and we need to listen and learn what you've been doing educationally and what you want to do, what directions you want to go, what's been working for you, what hasn't, and we have processes to engage people that we will talk more about.
Well, the third step in that process has to do with visioning, and it's coming to understand options, alternatives, and various directions that community members may wish to explore. The thing that we always emphasize, now is the time to do this type of exploration. No idea is a bad idea. It's worth vetting it. For those on the table here, you'll often be tapped on the shoulder in the market. We saw your presentation. Option A, B, and C. Have you thought about this? What we want to do is have you be as facile with the information so that you're able to be responsive. Well, that's a great question. Here's why we thought that may work, and here's why option D, E, or F was studied. But here are 4 reasons why it doesn't work for our regional school system. So that type of exploration happening now is easy because it's on paper. You do not want to have that happen as you get further into a process or begin to engage in future efforts trying to reshape or think about the regional school system.
So part of that effort is to make sure that, as trite as it seems, everyone's pulling in the same direction, except for the guy to the left there who appears to be doing nothing. So what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone knows the information, everyone understands, there's a shared understanding of the information as it's developed. If it isn't understood at a point, then back up and try again. Understand it in a different way, come to that understanding in whatever way it takes to get your school committee, your staff, and the neighbors around you to understand what that documentation means. So existing conditions, collecting this information is might be the easiest piece of it. It's a physical world, the buildings are there. It's a little bit easier to understand what exists. Might be a little bit more difficult to understand how it operates. The operation of buildings evolves as the staff changes. So how it was originally designed may not be at all how it's operating now, and therefore it might not be as efficient as it was designed to be. We like to think that the education didn't get obsolete, the building did. So as we start to understand its appropriateness, we can then figure out if, given what the building needs to catch up to the education, is it economically or financially viable to keep that building in? What might the life cycle cost be, and what might its impact on education be as you keep that functioning? Collecting from this point of view is relatively straightforward to illustrate as well. If you look at a map for a high school that we did, the red are red on purpose. Those are accessibility issues. Back in the 90s, the federal government came down and said you need to be accessible for everybody. If you're not now, that's a serious issue. So we'll take a walk through the buildings, identify those, and start to go. Problem is, a lot of the buildings built prior to that time have quite a bit of difficulty being universally accessible, so we'll start to work on program issues to make sure that's not getting in our way. Blue are building code issues. Generally, these are, you see fewer of these because your code officials are going through at the start of every school year, they're pointing this out, and your facility staff is generally staying ahead of these. And finally, the green are the bigger blocks. Those are facilities issues. That's where your facilities and your education are no longer aligned, and that's really becomes the crux of the master plan. As we collect this together and start to say, if we understand this and we agree on it, right, being able to go back and explain to the public, here's what we learned, then we start to talk about how to address it. Do we add on to the building? Do we renovate the building? Is it a big renovation, a minor renovation? Is it taking a building offline? What is the best approach from a financial and educational point of view to move forward? And since everything takes a long time to build, we start to look at how do you put this into your capital improvement plan so you can address the smaller issues as you move forward. We generally work on a 10-year capital improvement outlook, which gives you items that are going to fall within your first 1 to 3 years. Those things that we think you really need to start looking for some money for, 3 to 5 and 5 to 10. Generally 5 to 10 you can see far enough out where you can get those into line, but that 1 to 3 are the issues that you generally know about or suspect, and we want to surface those, put a price to them, and start to allow you to integrate those into a budget. And then we can collect it in any number of ways. The left-hand one there is just a quick survey form, walk through the building, take some notes, and start to categorize it right from the beginning. The right-hand one is a review of the benefits of savings from a energy reduction scheme that the district set a threshold of addressing everything that would come to fruition or pay for itself within 3 years or 4 years. The program ended up being so successful that they ended up reaching down to about the 8-year range. Simply by implementing it in a very structured way and getting through all of their buildings, they realized about double the savings they thought they would get from the first approach. And in real world explanation of this, the buildings to the left were not studied through with our MEP engineers. Those are the energy that they use per year. Buildings on the right are comparable buildings size-wise and programmatically, and show a savings of about 50% over the each year, which allows you to start to implement on a capital point of view because you're saving on an operational point of view.
So we listen very carefully as we work with you to develop the educational program. And by program, what we mean is how you want to educate children in your school district, how they're going to be distributed across the buildings, what's going to happen in those buildings so we can determine what the space needs are. Part of understanding all of that is identifying how many students you're going to have as we go down the road. In order to do that, we need to get a demographic study, so we bring in our consultant. And a demographic study is more than just an enrollment projection. So you can take a look at how many students you have in kindergarten right now and say that's how many we're going to have in the 5th grade 5 years out, but maybe not. Maybe there are some other things going on in the community that are going to affect the number of students that you have. And there are quite a range of things that could happen. So we take a look at things like what kinds of housing is available, what's its market value, how does it compare, is it drawing people into your community because it's affordable housing, or is it driving them out because they can't afford it? We look at open space for new construction. We look at economic factors in the community, businesses that might be here that would bring employment opportunities and bring people in. Those kinds of things all affect the number of students that you're going to have 5 and 10 years out. So what you're seeing here are some examples of how we analyze that information. Here's a case where the red part of the bar represents the number of students, and then the part above that represents the capacity that they have. So they have way excess capacity in this particular case, largely because it's a school district that has declining enrollment, has had for years. They own portables that they still own and don't need. So those are the kinds of things that we have to take a look at. When we talk with you, we just want you to be comfortable in knowing that we talk education. We understand the 4 C's. We understand what that means in terms of instructional methodologies and how teachers work with students in classrooms. And we also have plenty of ideas about how spaces can be configured so that project-based learning or personalized instruction or working with different groups of kids can be done. We have a process that we go through with folks that first is visioning, where we talk about a lot of different options, a lot of different things that can happen, and imagine what you might want to do. From that, we develop an educational program that's largely developed by the district with our support. It's all about how students are going to be educated in the different schools, what kinds of courses they'll take at the high school level, what kinds of departments you will have, if you have departments and that sort of thing. And then from that, we develop a space summary plan. The MSBA has some very clear guidelines for what kinds of spaces need to be made available for what kinds of students and programs and so on. And so we develop that program for you. And then when the program is developed, we check back to where we started. You know, will this program and these spaces support the vision that you originally settled on? So it's an iterative process that we go through with you. And as we go through this, iteration after iteration, we talk about some of the things that are out there as possibilities, maker spaces and STEM classrooms or STEAM classrooms and spaces for collaboration, breakout spaces for students, and all those kinds of things, and see what you're interested in, how that might be worked into your educational program.
So that third step that we talked about had to do with visioning, and it's really all about generating options and alternatives. The types of things that we want to come to understand is what's possible. Establish parameters to enable the process, and come to understand impacts on students, residents, teachers, and budgets. So this is one tool that we use. We call it the family of options. And this matrix really is just a key that we use to establish the range of options explored. In this example, we are looking at about 7 options. Every time we do one of these matrix studies, we always establish what we call either a do nothing or no action first starting point, and that's what we identify in option A. Because there's one thing that's for certain. These real estate holdings that the school district holds, this regional school district holds, are likely the largest land holdings of either of the communities. And these are some of the most important investments in either of the communities. So many people might think do nothing means zero cost. And that may be true. But in most studies, as we work our way through, we come to understand that the mere operation of the facilities going forward, using simply what you have in the condition and in the way that you are employing it, will not be a zero-cost option. And that helps us as we compare options and alternatives beyond that. At the other end of the spectrum, option G down there, in this case, it was a 5-school district, and we said, what if we built 3 new schools? It's outlandish, never achievable, but it set another end parameter for us to understand what's at the other extreme and how does that compare to these options and alternatives. And it's really a useful tool in being able to evaluate these various families. And you'll note, option family B, this yellow, we then described with the schools that were available within the district. And many people refer to these as our monopoly cards. But what they do is really show what each individual school is able to carry. 18 total classrooms, enrollment for planned enrollment, and then what are the capacities by grade level for each of the facilities. So it's a very clear way to concisely gather information and come to an understanding of usage. And then this is another tool that we use where it's a comparison of these various options. So you might say option family B looks really attractive. How does it compare to option family C? And again, for those in the back of the room, you can help me read this. This entire category speaks to cost. This category speaks to construction issues. This category speaks to educational results, and this project results. So you might say, for educational results, how does option B within this particular consideration compare to other options? And you see over here in the scoring, least advantageous is 1, highest is 5, so you're looking for higher numbers. If we're comparing option B, it's at the lower end of the spectrum, and it's outscored by most of the other options. But then you could also tab these columns vertically and come to understand that an option that didn't perform necessarily well in a particular strand does extraordinarily well as compared to all considerations. Now, the issue about these considerations is that we'll work really closely with your community to gather the considerations that are most important to you, because they change from community to community as we assemble that listing of considerations. We do get into GIS mapping when needed. It's not always needed as part of a study, an early part study, but it is a very valuable tool for communities that are trying to understand districting questions or trying to understand specific loading questions within the community. And from that, we can produce a series of options and alternatives relative to catchment areas. By simply moving lines within a mapping, it constantly restates how each particular school within the district would be loaded. So then finally, we piece all this together into a final report, and I've brought a couple copies with me this evening. They're 8.5 by 11-inch documents. They're not quite phone book size. The executive summary is usually less than 20 pages, and it incorporates all these types of tools and many more in terms of how we go about our work. Also included within it are the types of reports that Greg was referring to, individual breakdowns, building by building, in terms of final assessment of that particular building relative to capital needs. So it's a live document. It's one that we expect would be used regularly within your community as you move forward beyond the planning process. And the last thing that we'd like to touch on, and thank you for this time, is community participation. It's one of the most important elements of these types of studies. It's an opportunity to understand how do we apply a variety of communication channels, how do we determine what works best for this community, and how do we best incorporate feedback to create the best plan possible for your community. This is an example of a sample of a community workshop. We typically recommend at least 3 community workshops, an opportunity to invite the community in and have them go through about an hour and a half of discussion and exploration on a variety of topics. Down this left-hand column, a series of ways that we've reached out in communities, and we would work closely with you to understand what might work best here for Dudley-Charlton Regional School System. These are some examples of people within workshops, sticky note exercises, trying to get direct response. Call this the hot button thing, trying to have a XY axis series of questions around concerns or considerations. Trying to reach out to all members of the community, trying to find them at a lot of different demographic levels and age groups. These young boys, that's an important element of the type of work we do. Having families be able to attend a workshop like that is very important. Having the moms and dads that are sitting out here paying attention to another part of that workshop know that their kids are actively engaged and doing something that's positive and not disruptive is a real benefit in terms of getting families to be part of these types of interactions, and we work hard at that. At the end, it's all about community partnering. Interaction, communication, consensus building are at the core of it, and as I said earlier, in a regional school district, it's probably one of the most important elements in terms of finding your way to successful outcomes. And at the top, we touched on these 3 keys to success. I'd have you think about them because truly, if you can find that team with a great process that fits your community, a team that has the right kinds of experiences to come to bear, you're off to a great start. And so, again, thanks for your attention here, and we're really interested to kind of come to know what's on your minds and what kind of questions you may have.
Any questions? No?
A lot to digest.
A lot to digest. We are going to discuss at our next meeting,
Yes?
but
I mean, it has to be asked. This is obviously very thorough work that you do, but are we looking at a cost range for something like this? Obviously, you sat before you came up to hear of our financial concerns with our district, so.
Sure.
Is there a way that you can put a range to something like this?
Yes, we've offered, an opinion in terms of the cost range. We've shared that with Rich earlier. I'd offer this. There is no more important time to think about this type of planning than in a position where you know that dollars are tight, you know that you're making critical decisions. Because for a community to understand that these facilities, and these are the largest real estate land holdings within the communities, are being well cared for, that the money that is invested is being invested as wisely as possible and as efficiently as possible, that's really a powerful message, and it's an important one. And certainly, we feel very strongly that it's this type of pre-planning that avoids issues downstream where either the response to an issue is in a critical scenario where it's an emergency repair because something has been left underattended for a number of years, or conversely, money is set in place trying to rectify something and the district comes to know 2 or 3 years afterwards they have to take apart good money to get after another issue because it hasn't been phased properly or an understanding of requirement hasn't been fully understood relative to constructability issue. So those are the things that I'd come to think about, at a critical time like this in your district's thinking.
So what was the cost? That was the question. I'm gonna be blunt. You gave
Well,
the cost to Rich?
I did.
What was that
Can you tell
amount?
what cost that was?
Rich, would you?
It's not a cost, it's not a quote, but the range of figures that were presented were between $70,000 and $100,000 for a study like this.
Is there scalability to that?
There is, and we spoke about that. One option is to consider purely physical facilities as one kind of component and separate out the issue of educational planning and programming. So the number that Rich just shared was the combined kind of ed planning programming with physical facilities. That is absolutely our recommendation in terms of what would come to best serve the community, because it's not only an understanding of is the physical environment able to move forward, but actually are you getting the best and highest use out of the spaces that you are making available for the educational use. And that's always an important issue to come to understand.
You also had another quote, if you just did capital improvement, didn't look at the education plan, that was, you said about 50 to 70,000 is the quote we have.
Correct.
It'd be 100,000 to actually go in and do spaces and rearrange rooms and so forth, but the actually capital, just strictly capital, like roofs and things like that, the quote we would give them 50 to 70,000. Plus this has to go out to bid, so this may not be the people, we have to put that in there, this has to be bidded,
Sure.
Sure.
And I can offer the reason for the range is just simply, we don't know enough about your community as of yet to really know the complexity of the problem statement. So that range of cost for communities of similar size gives us at least a good point to say, yes, we know we can land it somewhere in that range.
Thank you.
Should you move forward and be successful in building a new high school, you will absolutely be required to do educational visioning by MSBA, just like you would do it if you were building your own home. So, you have, that ability to kind of get some of that, not all of it done, because it would be very specific to whatever building, in this case, a high school that you were building, but it's part of that process anyway.
But Dr., through
Go
the
ahead.
chair, to that point, if we were to consider spending the money in this manner at this point in time, and then we were to move forward with a new high school or something to that effect, and there was very specific requirements, what is the likelihood that this would not encompass what the requirements would be requested of the state?
I don't know, I'm not a GC, but I can tell you that, in building our high school in Hanover, we did educational visioning prior to anything. We had engaged our architects at that point in time, and they were part of that visioning process so that the community and all of the stakeholders were involved.
Okay.
So all I'm suggesting is that, whether you do this at a later date, it is some, educational visioning, planning for use, and looking at use. And I would even suggest that before you make serious decisions around facilities with respect to infrastructure or anything like that, you want to know that it meets your educational programming. Why would you dump all of this money in a building if down the road the space is the space is the space and it doesn't meet your educational programs of the future? So, unless you had a roof that was leaking and you needed to repair it. But, so that's that's why the two kind of go hand in hand if you want to do both.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we will we're going to have it on our agenda
Yep.
next time for a discussion.
April. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Rich, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much. As the committee is aware, and as you were discussing briefly, as I overheard, the district is looking to at joining a joint purchase group for health insurance. These have been discussions that have been ongoing for a while. Unfortunately, the initial conversations that started as early as December of 2017 about the possible creation of a new joint purchase group developed over the spring and summer and through the fall. And there have been many attempts by our insurance consultants who are here, and actually I'd like to invite up to the table if permissible.
Chris and,
Kate Sherry.
what is her name now?
Kate Sherry and Chris Nunnally from Gallagher Benefit Services.
Hi,
How are you?
How's it going, everybody?
GBS, formerly known as Group Benefit Strategies, has been the insurance consultant to the district for
20 years,
Yes,
probably.
and your father
Yep.
probably was.
Yeah.
We were here. We know.
And so, those discussions have continued on into the fall, where we finally had a core group of member communities that expressed interest, not only interest in the concept, but interest in actually sitting down and trying to hammer out an agreement. So that work continued, and ultimately, I think it was in January that the bid for what the health insurance would look like went out, well, maybe it went out on the streets in December, and, the opening was planned for January. During that time, one of the concerns that I expressed at the table for Dudley-Charlton was we've been running very well as being self-insured the last couple of years. The recommendation to go to one carrier has proved to be a very successful formula for our district. And our members have become very sophisticated consumers of health insurance. And I don't say that lightly, because it's easy to say, oh, I need to go to the emergency room. Maybe nowadays there are fewer emergency rooms than there are critical care clinics, but that concept of going and having a smaller copay, the concept of going and having a smaller overall charge and getting the same service, if not better service, our employees here seem to take to heart, especially in light of the fact that when I started here, the trust fund was in deficit of about $250,000. We've been able to turn that around, again, through the recommendation of going to this one group and a couple of small plan design changes many years ago. and have, come up to the point where we had $1.8 million as a certified balance at the end of last year. So with the bids being received and being reviewed, with a time lapse to try to extend the bid deadline to maybe get other bidders in, it was certainly important for Dudley-Charlton to try to have Blue Cross and Blue Shield participate in this process for us. They're our current carrier, again, and it's worked out very, very well over the past couple of years. One of the other potential members of this joint purchase group, Webster, utilizes Blue Cross Blue Shield as well. Unfortunately, even with the extension of the timeline, they chose not to bid. Why they chose not to bid, I do not know. I would defer to GBS for their knowledge of that, if they have any. I don't know. And ultimately, the important information, the critical information that you would want to share when you're talking to our employees about this was made available literally the 2 days before February vacation. So, the Insurance Advisory Committee, and there are some members here tonight of the Insurance Advisory Committee, met in, the Tuesday after February vacation and came up with the game plan to hold informational meetings throughout the month of March at the various schools, and we've done that. We've had 4 different meetings. We've had probably in the range of 150 plus people attend. Many people on active plans, but many retirees as well. And one of the concerns that's out there is we don't know what the retiree who the retiree MedX carrier is going to be, because those plans run from January to December. And as a result, it's not advisable, based on the expert's advice, to put the bid out now, and I don't know how a carrier would be able to bid legitimately for pricing for 8 months from now.
But what you can guarantee for the retirees, that they will have identical benefits no matter what the carrier is that they have presently.
That was one of the keys for our participation in this joint purchase group. And I think, with the structure of the bid that they put out, we've been able to do that. The group would be a self-insured group through the Harvard Pilgrim, through the HPI arm of Harvard Pilgrim.
But you don't know the carrier yet.
We don't know who the carrier is going to be for the MedX plans. That is absolutely correct.
But we're guaranteeing them they're going to have the same identical plan as they have right now, the plan design.
In all 4 presentations that I've attended so far, I have tried to say that, there are some things that we know, some things we don't know. But 2 things that we can guarantee. The plan design for active employees will be duplicated with the joint purchase group, and the plan design for the MedX plan will be duplicated with the joint purchase group.
Can I ask a question about that before you move on?
Go ahead.
How can we guarantee that if we don't know the carrier? Maybe I just am not as educated on this topic as I could be, but can you explain that part to me?
As I understand it, and I would defer to GBS to jump in as I go wrong, as I probably will, because we're looking at being self-insured, we're not buying a plan that already exists. We're telling the carrier, these are the conditions. The carriers, when you're self-insured, are basically the credit card processing company. I spent a little time this afternoon trying to come up with the right analogy, and I think MasterCard and Visa might be it. The HPI or even Blue Cross Blue Shield for us currently are simply that MasterCard and Visa logo on the card. Our plan design is our plan design. It's exactly what we want, exactly what we've talked about and determined over the course of a number of years. And this plan design, while still very, very rich for employees, is something that is not outrageous in terms of cost. So when you're self-insured, you go to the carrier, and the Harvard Pilgrim, Tufts, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whoever, and you say, please act as my Visa, please act as my MasterCard. And the doctors, obviously, if they accept Visa, will accept Visa. If they don't accept Visa, they won't accept Visa.
I did have a question too, about the bids. Was Harvard Pilgrim the only one that bid, or we had other bids?
I'll defer to GBS.
We had six other carriers bid on this business.
Okay. That was one of the questions that a few of the employees had emailed me on. So there were 6 other
Absolutely, yep.
bids.
I have a button. Can I ask my questions?
Go ahead.
I have a whole bunch of them. I've given to Mr. Matthew, he will put this on the website for all the answers, but
And I
like them
think
on
most of us got these same questions,
them,
but we
some
knew
of
Kathy
myself,
was going to ask them. Go ahead,
I'll go on with
Kathy.
the Blue Cross. What was the reason why Blue Cross didn't bid? Did they give you a reason why?
They didn't really give us a definitive answer as to why they wouldn't bid on it. With their municipal business, Blue Cross has a lot of municipal business in Massachusetts. We went back and forth with discussions with them. We actually held a conference call and invited all the carriers who the bid went out to participate in the conference call so that we could have questions and answers and really hammer through some things about what exactly the clients were looking for them to express some concerns, and Blue Cross did not join in that call. We then had a separate conference call directly with them, with the kind of the top administrators for the municipal government unit at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We were told that they would get back to us with a decision, and then kind of at the last minute, they declined to quote and left it at that.
Okay. I think you answered the other one. Regardless of what plan, I think the one that for the active employees, that's pretty much set. And I asked Mr. Matthew if he would draw up chart showing what the people have now, and right next to it what Harvard Pilgrim. So line by line, that should be a perfect match. Should be no change whatsoever in the two. If we put them up on top, you wouldn't know which one we were talking about, correct? Because they'd be identical?
Correct.
So I asked Mr. Matthew to, either someone or you, to print up and put that online for the staff to see that it is the same plan, just a different name.
Right, Kristen, you said you had that summary.
But as we say, for the retirees, we can't do that yet because it's too early.
No, you can do
Well,
that.
but I mean, we're not going out to bid, so we
I
don't know
think
who
what
the
might be
carrier is.
appropriate, though, for the retirees is for us to show, similar to what we sent out in our request for quote for our active plans, telling the carriers if they wish to bid, they have to match the plan design. That's something that we might be able to make available, which at least prove to the retirees population that, yes, we are going to mirror the same plan designs that we currently have.
So we can be guaranteed it's going to be identical.
Correct.
But I do want to point out, though, that if we were to put things side by side, if
Right.
we're talking about the prescription coverage, some of our prescriptions are tiered 1, tier 2, tier 3. Sometimes the formulary changes, meaning that sometimes the prescription might go from a tier 1 to a tier 2. So that might happen. However, that could happen if you
We know
stayed
that.
fully insured with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. They have the authority to change that formulary. So that's one thing that's out of our hands, whether or not you stay with Blue Cross or whether or not you go to a joint purchase group or you go fully insured wherever you go.
And you do get that notification in the mail that the formulary has changed, so all the
Right.
companies do that
Yes.
with the prescription.
Yeah, I just want to point out that that's not unique to this situation, that's across the board with every
Right.
health insurance carrier, fully insured or
They're
self-funded.
always changing some.
Right.
On that
If I
same
may.
note, though, for the active plans, we will be mirroring the exact tiers your drugs are currently in. So what you're paying for the drugs today, you will be paying tomorrow, because that's a self-insured plan, where when you go work into the Medicare plans, that's a fully insured prescription drug plan, so we have less control over that formulary. Does that make sense to everybody?
No, say that again.
Yeah, so a self-insured group, which is your active plans, we are going to be mirroring the exact same, so what you're paying for a drug today,
Yes,
it'll be the exact same formulary, July 1st,
yeah.
because that's a self-insured plan, so we have
And
complete
it will
control over
be
that.
the same tiers, you mean?
Correct.
Okay, but why not the retirees? Because we were always on the same tiers as the regular.
Yep, so again,
insurance.
plan design, the tiers will be exactly the same plan design-wise, but to Kate's point, the formulary
Oh,
may.
the formulary might change. And it
Just
does
like with the
change
carriers,
now
correct.
with anyone.
Correct.
Okay, a couple other questions. What happens after 2 years? We can't guarantee the plan what would happen after 2 years.
Well, after 2 years, the district can choose to remain with the joint purchase group. If it decides to withdraw from the joint purchase group, it could do so effective June 30th, 2021. If the district did withdraw, we would have the option of looking at premium-based plans, looking at going back to being self-insured as a small group, looking at other joint purchase groups, or looking at Maya, which is kind of a combination of premium and self-insurance.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So after 2 years, if we were to go back and look at other options, and we had claims experience with the major group, with the larger group that was worse than our current claim experience, does that count against us? Like, are we going to be based on the total claim experience, or are we going to be based, will they only splice out the Dudley-Charlton claim experience?
And Chris can answer that, because I had some questions. If there is a catastrophic event in one of the other towns, right, and will say Dudley rates go up if Webster had a catastrophic, and you call that, what did you say, it was a shot?
A shock claim, we call it.
A shock claim. And being in a group, explain, you said that would be advantageous to everyone.
So certainly, so as a smaller, sorry. So yeah, as a smaller self-funded group like we are today, just a couple shock claims, a couple large one-time claims can really affect your rates for the next year, right? Whether that be stop loss, I think some of your questions that you asked, we put the stop loss increases over the years. There's been some large double-digit increases that we've seen in this town, I mean in the school district here. So when you're a larger group and you spread that risk throughout a larger population, those shock claims or those large one-time claims have less effect on the entire population because there is a much larger population of healthy people. So again, the larger your pool is, the less effect one claim could have on that overall pool. So again, that's what gets rid of those high increases that you normally will see, or your random high increases. So when we say we're trying to get rid of the peaks and valleys, part of that is spreading that risk throughout a large population of people. Does
So
that
they
make
don't
sense?
care if the claim, they don't care what town filed the claim, basically?
So I think to your point, Jamie, is it Jamie? The question was, if we go to leave, the joint purchase group I'm sorry, Kathleen, sorry. Will the overall group's claims experience be held against us if we go to leave? The answer is no, because you'll be based on your own claims experience at that point when you try and leave the joint purchase group. Does that make sense?
It does. And can I just further ask, aren't we joining a group that also has the same, very similar claim experience as we do?
Correct, yep.
So that's not really minimizing our risk at that point, is it?
It is because again, what we're mostly concerned about is we don't want just a couple claims to completely increase your rates. So right now, if one or two people get really sick in Dudley-Charlton, that's going to have a large impact on your rates. Or if you're part of a much larger pool of people, those one or two people that get sick are not going to have as large of an impact. Because we're talking about, again, the one-time claims, so like a kidney transplant, a heart, those kind of things. Those are those big one-time claims that you typically don't see revolving numbers coming from. So those are the things that help smooth out that trend line. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I have a question. In 2 years, I know you can't see into the future, but suppose you decide to stay in this group because it's doing okay. Do you go out to bid again? Or do you stay with the same carrier, or what happens, like in 2 years?
How long is the current bid for?
So the bid was guaranteed for 3 years, but we can go out to bid for a carrier, I suppose, anytime we feel like it.
No, that was another question.
As a board.
I would say generally speaking so we consult for over 200 municipalities in Massachusetts. And I would say every 3 to 5 years, it's good to go out and survey the marketplace. Even if your employees are happy with the coverage that you have, if your claims are running well, just to go out and kind of doing your fiduciary responsibility.
So right now, it's 3 years you'll go out to bid if we decide to stay in the group.
Why don't we decide to be 3 years to begin with? This is only good for 2 years that we're committed this. Why didn't we commit for 3 years if the bids were good for 3 years?
Well, we wanted to get that rate guarantee for 3 years.
But we may not be there in the third year.
Doesn't mean you have to stay in for 2 years. And again,
we can
when
pull
forming a new joint purchase group, which is what you're doing right now, it's important to have stability, but also flexibility too, because this is something new. We consult for 8 out of the 10 joint purchase groups in the state. 25 years ago, we helped to form the West Suburban Health Group. So we know what this blueprint looks like, but again, understanding the needs of each employer, the needs of the employees and the retirees, that with that joint purchase group agreement, which we put a lot of work into, a lot of thought into the language in it, to have that flexibility in there so that you can explore your options after 2 years. It's not the intent to lock anyone into something like this.
And if we do decide to stay in the group for a third year because we like it, how about the plan design? Will that change, or are you going to keep it the same if you decide to stay in the group?
Well, if we decide to stay, it's our plan design. If the other members of the group were to say, okay, we want to go to one common plan design for everybody, Dudley-Charlton would have to make a decision. Do we want to stay and make this plan design change, or do we want to leave and keep our own plan design?
Okay.
And we would have that option.
We were also told the administration costs would be lower. What are they now, what will they be after this?
So I don't have that figure in front of me, but I
do.
answered those questions.
Yeah. So the total administration costs for FY '20, if we were to remain ourselves, is a blended total of $120.82. The total, if we were to join the joint purchase group, is a blended total of $74.20. And when I say that, GBS breaks the administration fee down to a cost per subscriber per month for individual and family.
So that's $120 per person? Is that what that means?
Yes.
And it's gonna be
Per
$7
per subscriber.
per subscriber, so it's down about $45?
Yeah, but again, that's blended for both individual and family.
Okay, but it's relatively the same if you're doing it for both figures. It's blended 120, it's blended 74. So
Right, yeah,
it's basically
exactly. Yeah,
$45.
so, it's a substantial savings right there.
So I have a question. I had to go back and ask some of my actuarial friends. So typically, from what I'm hearing and what I did research on, the insurance rates are going up by like 6 to 8% on average, correct? And then the prescription rates are going up 13%?
Over the
Is what
past
I'm
couple of
hearing?
years, they have, we've seen that prescription trend come down, but that's industry trend.
Right, that's industry trend. So how is the company, like, how is Harvard Pilgrim quoting us a rate that's so much lower that we're almost at like a 12% differential, lowering our costs? Like, how are they gonna sustain that?
So it's a good question.
It's a great question.
So I don't think it's quite a 12% difference in cost, but
So what is the current percentage decrease in cost that we're gonna have next year?
I think the composite decrease was right around 5%.
Okay, so still, that's an 11% differential, pretty much.
Oh, you mean from trend to what? All right, so that's a good question. So there's a few things that we did when we went out to bid. Number one is, again, like we keep talking about, you always want to have your relative fixed cost as low as possible. We achieved that by forming this joint purchase group. The second thing you do once you're a larger group is it allows you to direct contract with pharmacy benefit managers. And those are the folks that work with the pharmaceutical companies to source the drugs to the trust.
Okay.
Underneath the current arrangement, you don't see all the rebates, or they might be built into the cost of your drug, but there's varying opinion on that. So once you're a larger group like we are, we're allowed to direct contract with a pharmacy benefit manager, which allows you to receive all the rebates directly back from the pharmaceutical companies. That achieves you about a 15 to 20% savings on your prescription drug cost, which is about 20% of your overall cost. So that wasn't all of your savings in prescription drugs. It came down to your stop loss, it came down to your admin fee, and it came down to your drug savings. That's where we saw the largest savings. And beyond that, the ability to use the United Network outside of the state of Massachusetts, who have very good contracted rates with providers, also helped.
That leads me to the question, what is the cost of the reinsurance? You said it's gonna go down. What was it and what is it going to be?
So before you answer that question, just right now what we have to do is use our underwriters and we have to come up with a projection of what the stop loss is going to be, because with stop loss carriers, they want the most up-to-date data before they're going to give you an insurance quote, right? Because they're dealing with these large claims only. So we typically got to bid in about a month and a half for those. So right now we have a projection of what that would be. Our underwriters are pretty good at what they do. So Rich has those numbers in front of him.
Yeah, so if we were to remain self-insured on our own, again, the blended reinsurance rate would be $194.02. Under the projected rates for the joint purchase group would be $177.
And that's standard every year, standard procedure every year with setting the reinsurance rates. Historically, when we build recommended working rates for Dudley-Charlton, for your self-funded rates, we have to make an estimate as to what we think that the portion of it's going to be for the reinsurance, because you set your rates and then you get your reinsurance, your stop-loss coverage put in place after that. So this is just standard practice anyway.
And the stop-loss is 110,000?
Yes.
Could you address the fact some people that it's contacted by were worried about if they're out of the region, what happens to their insurance, and it's United that takes over? Could you explain that to the general
That's a good
public?
question. I think the perception might be out there, and I've heard a few different times, is that United, that if you're out of the state of Massachusetts, you're going to be with United Health, who may not have the best reputation for their customer service and how they handle their claims. In actuality, through Harvard Pilgrim's wholly owned third-party administrator, HPI, what we're doing is we're simply renting United's network outside of the state of Massachusetts. So what we get is their contracted providers and their contracted rate out of the state of Massachusetts. But who actually processes the claims will still be HPI. Who actually handles your customer service will still be HPI. So more or less, like with a few things we're talking about, you get the world of a huge network. United's network is the biggest in the country, but you get the local backing of Harvard Pilgrim, which is frankly a nice situation.
Any other questions? There are retirees here this evening, so, Jenny? Come on, Jenny, come on up, because we won't be able to hear you.
You can sit here.
Yeah.
I want to know, so Blue Cross Blue Shield is dead in the water. That is not an option for us any longer?
They did not bid.
They didn't bid, so they don't want our business, they don't want our money.
Right.
Or an independent, not a joint venture. Is there a difference?
So-
Will they keep insuring us if we keep it as a self-funded district?
Chris?
Yep, they will renew,
consultant.
correct.
Yes,
They will?
yes.
Okay, yes. No, see, I don't understand, because I didn't have any of this communication. So just for clarification, I'd like to know. Okay, also, because of this, letters haven't been sent out. I got one a week and a half ago. Now, is it my understanding that if you go forward with this and we give the active members the Harvard Pilgrim, will the retirees on medics have any other choice? Or is this the only game you have?
Next January?
Are they going to go into the joint purchase group, the retirees?
Do we
At
have
the
any
end?
other
See,
choice?
you
Are you gonna
have,
give us a
you
menu?
still have Blue Cross until December, the end of December,
That-
because
that I
that's,
understand.
from January to December is the Medicare and Medics. Now, Rich, they're going into the joint purchase group after that. So they would have a different carrier. You will have Harvard Pilgrim.
Well, so we're gonna go out for a full bid.
You'll have to, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, you
yeah, I
have to
don't
go
wanna-
out for
I don't wanna
a
tell
full
them.
bid. It may, who knows, maybe Blue Cross will bid. You don't know who's gonna bid.
Here, Little Bird told me that Blue Cross said they were not going to bid on retirees.
I was
so
told that,
It
too.
would
He
do,
told us that.
Yeah,
it would do well for me to call up then, just personal.
Yeah, so it's typically Blue Cross's position that they will not take a Medicare plan on without the
Oh,
active
without
plans.
the actual regular, okay. I didn't hear it
If I
then,
could.
so.
We actually had a meeting with the Blue Cross Blue Shield municipal rep who came to the district and met with Dr. Nash, myself, and Mary Ellen, our benefits coordinator. And we asked that specific question, And even today, I had one last Hail Mary pass. Unfortunately, it didn't connect. But I did reach out to Maya to see if they would be interested in just the MedX business from us, not including it in the joint purchase group. And the answer came back no.
No,
I asked if one of the supervisors, as opposed to the sales rep, could give me a call back, and I'll do my best to try to get them to change their mind, but I think that it's pretty solid.
Maybe a senior advocate or something, the elder attorney or
And
something.
what,
Now, how many towns have completely, totally signed with this? Who is totally committed?
I think I can answer that question. So both Douglas and Webster have 100% committed that they will be
Okay,
signing
they've
the doc.
signed. They've
They are going to sign. They have to go wait through formalities, but both of them have committed that they will be signing.
Okay, so Stoughton hasn't?
Correct.
No. Okay, no, because I called him today.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I just want to know. I want to be
That's
an
good,
informed
Ginny. Yeah.
consumer.
Good.
I paid my union dues all these years, trudged through the water, and Dudley-Charlton, through hills and peaks and valleys, has always treated us well with your insurance. You have been wonderful parents, taking care of your employees with that. Okay, last question, I'll sit down. When is a letter going to be drafted? Has it been drafted? Number one, detailing the specifics of this plan and the implications of it. When will it be mailed out, and when will it be done, so that we will be informed consumers in an adequate time?
Can I just interject? I went to the Insurance Advisory Committee yesterday. They let me come, I'm not a member of that, but I want to hear these things. And they are going to have another meeting for retirees on April 8th. Has that been confirmed?
Yes.
There will be another meeting if you're available on April 8th, and also for April 3rd for the active
Anybody that
employees.
wants to come.
Active employees, but there will be a meeting on April 8th.
At what time?
3 o'clock, I'm not sure what building that was.
It'll be at Shepherd Hill.
At Shepherd Hill.
So if anyone's
April
around.
8th?
Yeah,
And
pardon?
then when's the one for the active?
April 3rd at 3:30, I think at the
Richard, Shepherd
DMS. I'm
Hill,
not sure if they
in the
confirmed
library
that.
or what?
It's okay.
in the auditorium.
DMS,
In the
3:30,
auditorium.
April 3rd.
Thank you very much.
At
And the-
Shepherd Hill in the auditorium, Ginny, on April 8th.
I think the goal of the April 3rd meeting is to address the active
Right.
population, and the goal of the April 8th meeting is to address the Medicare population.
Right, that's exactly what it is. They're going to be separate this time. So you would go to the
Right,
April
It never
8th.
hurts to be informed.
Right, thank
And then the
you.
IAC is going to vote on April 9th for their recommendation, which is not a binding recommendation, I don't think. It's just an advisory only. And then we'll vote on the 10th. That's the schedule that was set up yesterday. We specifically postponed the vote tonight because we
Okay,
thought
that's
these
it.
questions had to be addressed because we got so many concerns in the last couple of weeks.
Of course.
You know, so that's why it's been pushed back.
And we
to
have
two.
Doris, and I don't know,
Cheryl, isn't that Cheryl?
is that Cheryl? Is that,
Doris, before you come up, can I just ask one quick question?
Okay, go ahead.
Kelly? What happens if nobody bids for the retiree plan?
I commend you for
After
looking
that.
forward to other possibilities.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for 20
I'm sorry?
something year. Or did you want me to answer that, or? did
no, you can answer that one later. We'll talk, we'll see what Doris has to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
She's
thought you were
already-
looking at me to
No,
talk.
because they
Excuse
both
me.
at the same time, but Doris first. Go ahead, Doris.
I commend you for looking at other possibilities and trying to save money and all of those things. But I guess my big question is why? I worked in the district for 30-something years. From the get-go, we always had the gold plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have always had wonderful health coverage. So why at this time are we looking into something that may be equitable in the plan, one for one, and we won't know that until we're actually in with Harvard Pilgrim?
Chris.
There was one time, I think Richard said, 1 year, where we had a couple cases where you ran the funds down, the funds were low. But you're back up again. And I believe in the reserve, there's $1.8 million. Now, I don't know, it's hard for me to understand, if we are self-insured and we're doing okay, and we haven't had a problem for all these decades, then why are we moving to something that could be risky, has a lot of unknowns, doesn't tell the retirees too much? So there are many questions that people out there are asking too, as you know.
I can answer that question. The premiums will go down about $30 a month per person, a family plan. Is that a close enough estimate? About $30. For every dollar you put into the plan out of your pocket, the district has to pay 3 times as much. So if you're putting, let's say you're paying $300 a month, because it's $300, what is it a month, about $300 for the family plan?
There's all different types of.
Let's use 300 as an easy
From
figure.
medics,
For the 300 you're
it's
putting
cheaper.
into that account, out of the budget, the operating budget comes $900 per person. So take that times 500 employees approximately we have 500 between the two groups, would you say?
There's 400 active members. and
Okay,
what
so
you're talking
400
about for
active members, we're
members.
saving almost $1,000 per month on each active employee out of the budget. That's what it basically comes down to. It's a money issue.
Right, but there, I guess what I'm hearing is that if these towns come together and we need at least 1,000 members, that, you know, if we do the math here, I mean, we never know with health, right? What kinds of situations we're gonna have. But you're going into a bigger pool, a huge population, where there could be a lot of health claims.
But that won't affect the operating budget that we pay. That's a different issue.
Well,
Correct?
no, I'm talking about just, as far as operating budget, I'm talking about what we have now self-insured compared to the JPG.
Well, he claims it will be better because we spread out, that's what he
I
said.
guess the question is, how will it be better?
They claim the more people,
You
you're
spread it
spreading out
around.
more.
Well, yes, you're getting more premiums, but you also have 1,000 people that could get sick. Where we've had this for how many years? And it's been working. And Blue Cross is wonderful, no offense to
Chris,
Harvard
can you
Pilgrim.
address that? How we're saving, how we will
Yes.
be able to save the money?
So there's a lot of questions there, so let me slowly unpack it. The first question is if things are going well now, why are we looking at a joint purchase group? I think the answer to that question is when things are going poorly, that's not the time to go look at a joint purchase group, because you're not going to be attractive for any of the other members of that joint purchase group for you to join.
And if I could,
Sure,
to interrupt you, Chris, we know that because we tried.
We wanted to go into
We
the
wanted, we
Hampshire.
looked at Hampshire Council of Governments for a number of years and got the no letter for a number of years. The reason is because we were not running well. The reason that when I came into the position and we closed out the year, we had a $250,000 deficit was because we were not running well. Not only that year, but multiple years before that. So, you know, from my perspective, the fact that we've rebounded is fantastic. I'm thrilled with that. And I think now is the opportune time to take a look at trying to maintain the Cadillac, the gold standards that the district has always offered at the same price, or if the, you know, the group, joint purchase group concept really does work and work well with our group, maybe even less. You know, so having the same and paying less, in my eyes, is a good thing.
Yes, I think you basically covered it there. I think I think we keep talking about there could be a lot of sick people. If we grow the pool of people, there's going to be more sick people. The law of large numbers says there will be more sick people, but there will be even more than that healthy people, which will help lower the rate. Beyond that, as a larger self-funded group, it allows you, we've talked about this a few times, to direct contract with some of these disease care management companies that'll come in here and look at certain claims, because now you have enough sick people, there's a critical mass for that vendor to be able to help you out with those specific claims. So not only do you look at the fact that we're going to smooth out the curve by having a lot of people insured, you also have now the opportunity to actually look at your claims and actually affect those claims, because that's the largest pool of your money spent. About 5% of your population has, is it 50 or 80% of your overall claims? I forget what the exact, is it 50? 50% of your claims are for 5% of your people. So if we could affect those 5%, even 1%, lower the claims even 1%, you've had a great effect on your overall group. Right now, we're not in the position to contract with those outside vendors because of the size of our group.
What happened, the word on the street is that Stoughton's pulling out, is that true?
Yeah, I think Stoughton, I don't think they're ready at this point. They do have a new town manager. I think it was one of those things where we talked to the new town manager about it. She loves the idea of the joint purchase group, but she's working on a lot of other things. They're trying to negotiate in their general contracts. They're also trying to get down to one carrier. I think the conversation was, if it's going to happen, the earliest it might happen is January. But again, she's got a full plate. I don't expect it should happen by July 1st.
Well, what's the minimum you have to be a joint group? Is that a minimum number?
So yeah, the minimum number is 2 groups, number one. But when we first started these discussions, we said we want 1,000 subscribers so we could do the things we want to do around disease care management, around getting your stop loss to a certain level, around getting your admin fees to a certain level. So that was the golden number. That was our goal to start with, and we're going to achieve that goal.
Through the chair, could I just comment? I want to comment specifically on Harvard Pilgrim. I happen to have Harvard Pilgrim personally, and it's through my husband's company, used to be my company. It's a huge company. It's Commerce Insurance, Mapfre Insurance in Webster. And they do a significant amount of research to find the best policy. Their benefits package is always outstanding at that company. And so they put a lot of work into finding the best insurance possible for their employees. And we have had Blue Cross Blue Shield, we've had Tufts, we've had Harvard Pilgrim, we've had all different carriers. And I have to tell you, from a personal perspective, Harvard Pilgrim has been the best carrier that we have had for our family. The number of physicians that we can go to is outstanding. I don't have to have referrals to go to who I want to see. There has been no problem, even when somebody is not in the network. Just recently, I was telling Mr. Matthews today that we had to go see a particular specialist who did not take Harvard Pilgrim, and I submitted a claim online. It took me 2 minutes, and I just received a check for $1,900 without a problem, no questions asked. So just from a comfort level standpoint, for folks that are nervous about a different carrier because you're not used to that different carrier, one carrier is pretty much the same as another carrier, but I can just speak from experience that Harvard Pilgrim has been great. So that's my personal experience.
And change is not easy, because everybody has had Blue Cross forever. They probably never had another carrier, right? We've always had Blue Cross as far as I know.
An option, yes, not necessarily the only option, but yes.
One good thing about Harvard Pilgrim is the HMO, you don't need referrals, you say.
Correct, yep, they look at it as a network plan, so meaning that as long as you stay within the network, if you're within what's now the HMO plan, which will be the EPO plan, as long as you stay in that network, you don't need to get referrals.
What does EPO stand for?
That's a good question, whenever.
Exclusive provider option.
Nicely done, I've always been, thank you.
What is it?
Exclusive provider option.
Okay.
And if I might, one of the benefits of the way the joint purchase group is structured right now with HPI is that you will get not only a network inside of Massachusetts or inside of New England, but nationwide, all 50 state network through the United Health Network rider, if you will. And what that means specifically for employees and the district is people who have taken the PPO plan because they had a college student in Arizona or Florida or something, and they needed to provide coverage out of state, they were forced to take the more expensive plan for that quote-unquote luxury. Now they will not need to do that. Their students in other states will be covered under this plan through the normal HMO/EPO plan. So there's potential for greater cost savings than what's even projected based on our base numbers.
And I did have a couple of retirees that emailed me from Florida, and they said they asked their doctors they had, if they took Harvard Pilgrim, because they didn't understand they should have said United, because they never heard of Harvard Pilgrim. The doctor said, we've never heard of Harvard Pilgrim. So you have to make that clear too, to these retirees, that it's United.
Absolutely.
Can we go back to my question?
Go ahead.
What if nobody bids for the retiree plan?
Yeah, no, and that's a good question too. So I've been doing this for over 20 years, and our clients put things out to bid, like I said, every 3 to 5 years. We've never had a case where no one has bid on something. I can guarantee you, there will always be at least one company out there who will want your business.
And I can promise you Harvard Pilgrim's very, very excited about the opportunity to offer.
Okay, so because we haven't gone out to bid yet with the retirees, we're not sure if the retiree plan will be the same as what they currently have.
No, we said that.
They are.
We're going to vote on that.
Will be the same.
So, because you have that flexibility when you go out to bid. That's what we put in the bid is submit a bid matching the current plan design.
Right.
Okay.
And that's gonna be in
That's
both.
the only thing that we would accept.
But the only
coming back.
problem is we can't guarantee it's a lower rate than it is now if the bid comes in high. We can't guarantee it's gonna be lower, can we?
I think we,
There's no guarantees
Right.
on that, except for when we weigh the administrative fees too. So because of the prescription component of the rate, we have no control over that, but we would evaluate the rates on the medical piece and the admin fee.
So that it would not go higher, you could kind of tell us that?
We can't guarantee
No,
that.
but-
We don't know what the rates would
Well,
come
that's
in
the
at.
problem.
But, you know, when we do this process, is to get competitive rates.
Mm-hmm.
But we make the plan design when you're
I know,
self-funded.
I'm sorry. That was more of my question.
Yeah, which is good, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure
and-
everybody knows that.
I just have a further thing. One of the things that I'm just concerned about is that it just feels like with our staff, that it's morale kind of issue.
It is.
And that's one thing that I'm concerned about moving forward with the new superintendent, that we keep, like, one of the things I keep hearing about this district is how everyone's treated like family, and that there's this great sense of they love to work here. And I want to keep that sense here. And I feel that when we have our meetings, I think it would be really important for a Harvard Pilgrim rep to be there so that they can ask those questions to that exact person instead of having to like go through an intermediary. No offense, but
No offense,
I think
Dave.
it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think for our last couple meetings, we did have a Harvard Pilgrim
Oh,
rep
good.
come. And then for the next meeting, there will also be, I think the full Harvard Pilgrim contingent will come as well.
Okay, good.
Go
That's
ahead.
good feedback.
Is there a dental plan that's associated with this too, like Blue Cross has?
The dental plan is separate. It's not part of the joint purchase group at this time.
Will it stay Blue Cross?
It'll stay Blue Cross for next year,
Blue
yes.
Cross.
So you're going to have a separate thing for Harvard Pilgrim, a separate thing for Blue Cross Blue Shield Dental. And then those of us with kids out of state are gonna also have to deal with whatever United.
Nope, so, yeah, again, so you're not gonna have to deal with United, it's still gonna be Harvard Pilgrim. We're literally just renting the network. So right now, you'd have to, right now, under the current plan, where does your son go to, son or daughter go? Rhode Island. All right, so right now, they'd have to, right now, I think, because you have the New England plan, so there are doctors within that network. Let's just say your child is in Michigan or California, or if the case might be, you would not have access to a network plan at that point, so you'd have to be in the PPO. Underneath this new arrangement, those folks will now be able to enter the network plan. So again, your child will have the same card that you have, so when they go to the doctor, it'll simply be processed through the United network. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so, and your dental is separate now. The dental and the medical are not combined right now anyway.
Yeah, we currently have two different cards.
Same company.
The cards look the same, I always get confused as to which one to give.
Go ahead.
I know you said the formularies are the same and the tiers are the same, but the 3-month subscription to drugs and everything is gonna be going through Maxwell Plus, if I remember correctly. Now, that would infer that all seniors would then have to get all their scripts rewritten by the doctors and forwarded, because I'm going to assume that Express or whoever now is not going to transfer them. Is that correct?
So there is a mail order file that does get transferred over to the new carrier. So all that information will be brought over to the new carrier through a transfer file. That's how we've done it in the past with all of our carriers. So we've carved out drugs from Blue Cross before, and they have sent the mail transfer file. It would be a complete out of norm experience for them to decide not to do it. It's your information, it's your data, it's your claims. It'd be very odd for them. I don't see it.
The goal is to make the process as seamless as possible and to reduce the burden on retirees or any subscribers who are currently using any kind of mail order service.
So any other questions? Oh, Doris, go ahead, come.
I understand that the vote's gonna happen at the April 10th meeting. So that will be for this particular part. But how can you vote on the whole package when we don't know what the retiree piece is gonna be till January?
Well, you know what we're voting on, the most important thing is the plan design. The plan design is going to be exactly what you have now with Blue Cross. We're voting on that for the retirees. We don't know who the carrier is, but Rich said he's going to carve out the plan design with the carrier, and it's going to be identical. Because we're self-funded, we can do that. So that's the most important piece, that you get the same benefits, not the carrier, but the same benefits. Am I right, Rich?
Well, I think that's part of the issue. I think, in all honesty, and no disrespect is meant to any individual or company, I think if Blue Cross and Blue Shield had chosen to bid on this business, these conversations would be less intense and less worrisome for people.
Right.
However, they were given every opportunity to do that, and they chose not to. So we have, we I think, should continue to look at this and, figure out if indeed it is the right thing for the district or not.
But when we do vote, that's going to be included in the package for the retirees.
I find it interesting that Blue Cross is not interested in the group.
Okay, anybody else? Everybody, I gave ample time to speak. Okay?
Can I say one last
Go
thing,
ahead.
Mrs. O'Connor? One of the questions that's come up at all of the meetings is what happens to the existing health insurance trust. So I had a joke. It was received well 3 times. It was received poorly once, so I'm not going to repeat it. That said, one of the things that I do want to make clear is if we join the joint purchase group, we do need to provide an upfront deposit, just as we did with Fallon when we did that, and we would use the trust fund to accomplish that.
Right.
The money would come back into the trust fund if and when we were ever leave the joint purchase group.
And that was another question that a few had. The trust fund now, are we putting all the trust funds together? You're not keeping them separately?
Well,
Does that matter?
we would actually have we'd be part of 2 different trust funds. One, our own, our $1.8 million as of June 30th, 2018, and the second one through the joint purchase group that we would have a third of, or whatever percentage of membership that we had.
Okay. Any other questions?
You just said that, the retirees would have a choice of, you have to check out who the carrier would be. What are the choices of carriers?
Well, the carriers have to put in bids. They haven't yet because you...
They would be putting in bids.
Not now, because it's too early, because your insurance is going from January until December. So when do you put it in for bids, like in August, or?
Yeah, it would be about August.
It'd be about August.
So we would send it out to Blue Cross. We will include Blue Cross and Blue Shield in the bid process. Fallon, Tufts, Harvard Pilgrim, we would do Cigna, we would do Aetna, we would do United. Really, so we have kind of our standard list of municipal players, and then we include some more. So, and if we ever got a call from a carrier or TPA who wanted to bid on it, if it's BBA, which is the Blue Cross and Blue Shield third-party administrator, HPI, basically we wouldn't turn anyone away from the bid process.
So what you're saying is that we're gonna have a different carrier than the rest of the people that work?
Not necessarily, because I'm sure Harvard Pilgrim will put in a bid too.
Yep, so,
So,
yep.
I'm sorry, maybe you said this, but when are the bids going to go out?
In about August?
August?
Yeah. Go ahead.
By adding communities jointly that have municipal employees, is there any statistics that say that having fire and police who might be higher risk, I know they're higher risk for probably accidents, which is covered by workman's comp, but other long-term illnesses by police and fire that wouldn't coincide with what teacher problems are?
That's a good question
That's a
too.
good
We
question.
have a lot of data on that about claims history for school employees versus those who are in a higher risk profession. But at that, I don't know, I guess the way I look at it, at the end of the day, that's health insurance, is you have your, your healthier people who might offset your people who incur higher claims. But I think, and again, going back to the point of the size of this group, when we do data analytics and we look at, let's say, maybe your firefighters or your EMTs are having more more joint issues, what we'll be able to do is take a really deep dive at that data and say, okay, what kind of disease management, what kind of prevention programs can we put in place to help target these claims? So you're going to have, even with a bigger group like this, whether it's with Dudley-Charlton or spreading with the group, you're just going to have more control over controlling those kinds of spikes in claims, or those kinds of populations that you find. Sometimes with teachers in school districts, historically we've seen that you've had a higher risk of pre-diabetic population. So we'll be able to kind of really hone in on that, target that, and put together some targeted programs to help control those costs over time.
Any other questions, anyone? Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to take a vote to participate in the state-sponsored school choice program, 2019-2020 school year. Do I have to read anything?
No, but I will.
Okay, you, all right.
All right, so just as a reminder, as we presented to the school committee, every year in accordance with Mass General Law 76, Section 12B, each city, town, or regional school district shall enroll non-resident students at the school of the non-resident's choice, provided, however, that such receiving district has seats available as stated in said report that we submit, provided, however, that this obligation to enroll non-resident students shall not apply to a district for a school year in which its school committee, prior to June 1st, after a public hearing, which we have had, adopts a resolution withdrawing from said obligation for the school year beginning the following September. So that is the law that dictates or governs why every year a school district must take a vote. So my recommendation to the school committee is this for the following school year, 2019-2020, that the school committee vote to approve school choice for the 2019-2020 school year for the following grades and at the following number of seats. Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 30 seats at grade 9. Dudley Middle School, 15 seats at grade 7. And Charlton Middle School, 7 seats at grade 7 and 8 seats at grade 8. That number of 60 should bring us next year to the 180 students.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve school choice as Dr. Nash set forth to us.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Discussion.
I think it's important that the public know that the reason why we're adding down at the middle school is because we haven't been getting the seats filled at Shepherd Hill, and because that we rely on school choice for our budget, and that is why we have to add these seats.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I just want to make that comment as well. I'm not a big proponent of school choice. I think there's a lot of downsides to it. The only reason that I would vote in favor of it is because the class sizes are still manageable at the grade levels that we're looking at. But I think Mrs. Reed's point is well taken, that we are relying heavily on school choice to maintain our budget, unfortunately, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Anyone else? Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Now, is this going to be very, very long?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I was gonna say, we'll take it up next time.
No.
Okay. Report of the Policy Review Subcommittee. Okay, Mary.
Okay, I will go through this as quickly as possible. Okay, so everyone has all of the policies that we went through. We have several that are proposed for amendment, several proposed for deletion and several proposed for adoption. So did we want to make a motion first to?
Waive all
the
of them?
first reading?
Yeah,
On all
on
of
all
them?
of them, and then I'll take each one individually.
So moved.
Okay. Any discussion?
Don't jump on that.
Seeing none, all in favor? Okay.
Okay, so the first one is letter A, bullying. There is no change to the current language on that one. We're really putting in the references to the Mass General laws at the end, and we also want to be consistent with the mask policies where they list all of the Mass General laws, and if there's any other policy cross-references at the end of a policy, we're going to put that on all of the policies forward going. So that is item A.
Okay, so this is going to be our first reading. So,
Each one separately.
yeah, I'm doing
I'll make a
all of
motion
them
we
because,
accept this as
yeah,
Policy A as a first reading.
as a first reading. And any discussion? No discussion on any of it? Okay, all in favor? Okay, we have the first reading and it's unanimous.
Make a motion, we dispense with the reading of ACAB.
Well, we already,
Oh, we did all of
we
them.
did
Yeah,
them
we did them all.
together,
Okay,
that's
good.
why
Okay,
I
good.
said
Yeah,
to
okay,
save
good.
time.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
ACAB, sexual harassment, again, there's no change in the current language. On page 3 of that policy, we recommend eliminating the table of contact roles, schools, addresses, and phone numbers from within the policy. The reason for that is if any information changes, we have to bring it back to school committee. So we are posting that as information as part of the district's civil rights laws and district coordination information, which is posted on the website and in the schools.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on it? None? All right, all in favor?
Geez.
Motion carries, that's easy,
Yeah.
so far.
It's good to be last. Okay, so ADC, tobacco products on school premises. We recommend replacing the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District policy with the MASC policy. Ours is very specific, while the MASC policy covers all the bases in a much simpler, more concise manner. The new policy also includes reference to the consequences for students and/or staff. So we just felt that that was a better model for our district.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the first reading of policy ADC. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Okay, Stephanie, how about a second?
Sure. Second.
Okay, discussion. All right, all in favor? Oh, did we, okay.
One question. Okay, so you're changing it from the DCRSD policy to the MASC. Is this the MASC that's listed right here?
Yes.
Okay. And where is the,
It is the top part of that that's crossed out, that your current policy.
Okay,
Is the
that's the
policy
same.
that's,
Okay.
that you had
Okay.
that was crossed out.
all right?
And it was called smoke-free environment.
No, we're going to, that's proposed for,
That's
You're
proposed.
separating
see,
by
these,
categories.
yeah,
Okay.
these are amendments,
I'm just going alphabetically.
okay? I'm going by this little chart here, so,
Me too.
Can I ask, through the chair?
go ahead.
Does this policy currently, as it's written by the MASC, include vaping? Is that, does vaporization, is that, or do we have to specifically?
Any nicotine products.
Says right here.
Any nicotine delivery products?
All relies on vaporization.
Says that vaporization.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that it says that, but so the Board of Health regs at each municipality specifically say, and any other nicotine delivery devices specifically like written into this part of the reg as well.
Okay.
I can appreciate that you're trying to go with the state standard, but I think it would not be appropriate for me not to at least tell you that this is a little bit different wording than municipal Board of Health regulations for
Okay.
tobacco control.
So would you like to propose that
I would
wording
not like
change?
to propose much of anything right now because I would have to compare the two side by side. And I guess I just wanted to say, I'm fine if we change this, but I do think at some point, it doesn't need to be in, I can appreciate what you're trying to do. So I'm okay if we do this, as long as it's on your, I
List
guess,
to look
master
at.
list to know that at some point, these tobacco policies should mirror, in my opinion, the communities that have tobacco regulations for their health departments.
Okay.
First and foremost, they need to mirror the state law. So if your communities mirror the state law, then we should be mirroring the state law. And I don't know the community's policies, but I'm assuming that no community adopts a policy unless it's at least in conformance with the state law or above it.
So let me, I guess I can speak to that. For a health department, the health department has the right to create regulations that protect the public, that they see fit to protect the public. And so tobacco regulation, there is not, well, there is actually for an age for 21, but there is not a specific nicotine delivery device, flavored tobacco, any of these kinds of products. So each community has to work with their tobacco control commission. That's what we have in our area. That's what Charlton uses. That's what Dudley uses. And there is a, out of the city of Worcester, there's a tobacco control commission that would put together regulations as a draft boilerplate that your town now has to consider and then decide if they're going to adopt. And I guess I'm just saying, we should look at what Charlton and Dudley have adopted, and we should all be on the same page with it.
Okay, so would you, are you proposing that we accept
I'm not
this
against
as-
what you're saying.
As it is now, and then go back to it, or
I just
table it?
I would table it. Why don't you just table it?
Yeah,
Why change it a
because
year from now?
I'd rather not keep going back to the same policy.
Okay.
Fair enough, then I think we should table it.
Okay.
That's what we do. So we'll take back the second and the motion, okay?
Sorry, I
And
just
that's
feel like
okay.
that's something that we should really look at.
Thank you.
And I will commit to getting you those
So
regs.
you can work on that.
Good. Perfect.
Okay.
I don't know Dudley well, I know Charlton better, so I have to look. Dudley's part of the same coalition.
So they'll be the same then.
Yeah.
Well, no, every town has the right to make
So
their
it's
own
JEB
decisions.
is
Okay,
next.
so JEB is the next one on the list. That's the requirements for entrance. Kindergarten enrollment is an option, it's not a mandate, and there is no law that requires kindergarten attendance. In the current Dudley-Charlton Regional School District kindergarten policy, JEB includes a convoluted early admittance rule for kindergarten. When we researched it, it was found that this early attendance exception policy was created within the kindergarten policy in response to the request of one person years ago.
I could give the name, but I won't.
Me too.
I bet I know too.
You do too.
So the current state law states that each child must attend school beginning in September of the calendar year in which he or she attains the age of 6, while school districts must offer kindergarten, it's not mandatory. Thus, districts do not typically make an exemption for the age requirement for kindergarten. Dudley-Charlton is 5 years old by September 1st, but some districts do have a waiver language for grade 1 as children who are 6 by September are required to be in school. Current early attendance exceptions include at least 6 children who are taking seats from children who are of proper kindergarten age and may not be of the maturity of developmental level required for kindergarten. There is no real clear way to determine this. In addition, the CES principle indicates that the current policy places an undue burden in time on staff for a grade that has no mandatory attendance requirement. So we recommend elimination of the portion of the kindergarten policy which speaks of the early kindergarten admittance rule and brings consistency back to the enrollment procedure for kindergarten.
Make a motion to accept.
Okay, do I have a second?
Question?
We'll do it during the discussion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
I just have-
Discussion,
I just have one
Stephanie.
thing. I think the first sentence, a child must be 5, because should implies they don't have to be. A child must be 5 years, it's stronger, would you say that should?
Stephanie, you have
A
questions?
child must be 5 years of age instead of should.
So if a child misses the cutoff, they're no longer going to be able to test in for that
That's what
grade.
this says.
For kindergarten.
For kindergarten.
Kindergarten is optional.
No, I understand that.
And there are virtually no other school districts that I've seen in the state of Massachusetts that have any kind of exemption for kindergarten. Do they have it for grade 1? Yes, because grade 1 is mandatory. A child has to be in school by age 6, and if your child was born August 31st, some committees would potentially have a policy that would allow you to come before a school committee. The same issue holds true. The reason why every school district has a cutoff date is because you cannot determine. Some parent could come and say, My child was born on August 29th, or something else, and we could make an exemption for every single policy. This happens to deal with kindergarten, and kindergarten is not mandatory. So why one would have an exemption policy to kindergarten when it's not a mandatory attendance? It adds students to a district who potentially are going to have burgeoning. You're hearing us talk about the need to transfer potentially a teacher from Mason Road next year to CES in kindergarten. And so now we're looking at 6 at least, I think Laurie was at 6? 6 students who really don't qualify. And you have a policy that gives an exemption. There's no reason why we should have a policy, in my opinion, for an exemption for kindergarten.
The history of that, I think, is when new schools were opening, we changed the date from December 31st to September. So we wanted to give those parents kind of like a break if they want. I think that's what the history, and then there was a certain person who wanted it for them.
I would understand,
Yeah, that was the
and I
original
understand that
intent.
in many instances, in some instances, in many policies, Stephanie, Mrs. Reed, they have a school committee policy with an exemption for grade 1. I happen to have been in the district where they did that. And 6 parents came forward, and the committee couldn't say no to any of them because, quite frankly, we don't have assessments even for grade 1. So, so they had to say yes, and they couldn't say no. So now we had 6 extra students who basically came in. But in this case, it's simply because it's not required. So we are taking slots away from students, and making classes bigger, when in essence, we don't have to do that. And the question is, should we be doing that if we're going to be looking down the road at the potential of enrollment concerns because of staffing, because we have to eliminate staff. So that's the genesis behind taking out the kindergarten exemption. I think you can talk to this because I think I came to you and asked you about this.
So we have, this policy has been in place for, I want to say 13 years, 12 or 13 years. One of the hardest parts of it is the amount of time it does take for staff to test these children. Each child comes in 3 different days for an hour, and then I go into their preschools, I go and observe them, they have the social aspect. And very few, because of the guidelines are so difficult, very few do actually come in. I want to say in the past 12 years, we may have taken 5 of the children who have come in, who have met the guidelines that were set. Last year, the committee met again and redid the guidelines. Just because we found some of the tests some of the assessments were just out of date. So we did meet again. I will also say though, I'm a little on the efficient side, and the date is March 15th that they have to let me know by. And I had all my letters ready to go out on March 15th. And so those parents of the 6 people who have applied this year, I've already sent my letters out about the process. So if you decide to change this policy, please just advise me on how you want me to go forth with those parents that I've already notified of the procedure.
Okay, so we'll take a vote.
What are we going to do about that?
What?
We should address that issue.
Well, I think the committee can make a decision as to when you want the date from which you want to implement the
Right.
policy.
Well,
I
do we
think
want to make sure those 6 aren't allowed, or do we want to make it effective next school year?
If you choose the date
Yeah,
to
that's what I
implement this
mean.
policy, July 1st, and these people have already sent it in under the old policy, then they would be
I think we
fine.
should make good for the
If they've already gone through it. What's your feeling?
Because I've already sent them
Right.
all the letters, I
Yes.
sent them all the
Right.
surveys, all of my staff have already set up the times to have those students come in and test. If you're gonna change the policy
Yeah.
now, I do think we should follow it through with those 6
Right.
who
Yes.
have already
Make it
applied.
be July 1st or something.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do. We'll date it July 1st. Okay, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Okay. So the next one is policy GCCBA, additional sick leave. Legal counsel recommends eliminating this policy. Awarding of additional benefit, in this case sick leave, should not be a policy but a negotiated benefit in a union contract or a wage and benefits document. In addition, the current policy has potential of being discriminatory in standard of determining eligibility, work history, years of service, accumulated sick days earned, and attendance. Our current policy creates potential for contradiction in awarding sick days as both the principal and the superintendent award days in 10-day increments. So we recommend eliminating this policy per legal counsel.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to delete this policy.
Second.
Discussion.
I just want to ask Dr. Nash, are we going to address this anyplace else like procedure, or are we dropping the whole issue of the extra 10 days?
It would have to be part of either your wage and benefit personnel discussion somehow, or from DCTA.
Okay.
You know, as far as a request.
Okay.
But we did inform.
Okay.
I did mention that to them, that I knew that the policy subcommittee was undertaking this for discussion.
Okay.
And I think that came up in our discussion.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All in favor? Okay.
Dr. Nash, do you mind taking GLCCA?
Oh, sure. Sure. Life-threatening food allergy policy, what we're really asking, this was a policy that you adopted in 2013. Actually, the policy for adoption came out in 2002 when the former Commissioner Dave Driscoll created one of the best documents he ever created, or DESE ever created, which was the Managing Life-Threatening Allergy document. I have a copy of it somewhere in here. It was updated in 2016, but the point in making this is that the point in all school districts required to submit their policies actually to DESE when we created them was that not only did we proactively say that every school district will have a plan, but we also outlined the roles and responsibilities of all of those stakeholders involved, whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a bus driver, a cafeteria worker, or whomever. The interesting part about your policy, it doesn't make it district-wide as it currently sets, because it actually says in the first sentence, it's the policy of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District to set age-appropriate guidelines. Well, guidelines aren't policies, and then later on, in the last paragraph, they should be specific to building. Procedures are about buildings, policies are policies. And so what we're asking you to do is to adopt a policy that's more comprehensive, that clearly outlines the roles and procedures and responsibilities, for all of the various stakeholders. It is in concert with and parallels the guidelines from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, their new manual, and I think it's an important step forward for us to do this and be consistent with their recommendations.
Okay, so first, we will, we're replacing policy JLCCA. So in other words, we'll delete that policy.
Right.
So I'll entertain a motion to delete the policy. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right.
Thank you. And
Now we'll have a first reading on the new policy, which will be JLCEAR. I need
Right.
a motion. First reading, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I do on the last previous page, I don't know what page it is.
Did you find a mistake?
Well, no, it's not just a typo, this is actually a mistake.
This is actually-
Well, responsibility of the van drivers, it's on the bottom of the second to the last page.
Second to last page, okay?
It's second to the last, it says responsibility of van drivers, then it says they should pull over. And then on the next page, participate, then it starts talking about coaches and so forth. That should be a different heading, I would think. The second.
Well, sometimes coaches drive, I think the point was
Well, maybe we
that,
should put that at the heading then or
yeah,
something.
in some districts, maybe that responsibility of van drivers needs to change and be a little bit broader.
Something change the
Yeah,
title, because
yeah,
that has to
right.
be more than just van drivers. It
Right.
says coaches and after-school
Sure,
participation.
yes.
So just fix the title.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
point well taken, thank you.
So we'll still have the first
That's fine,
reading,
just
we
one of
just,
them
that's
it's just-
minor
it's just
change
rewriting
for
the
the
title.
next, the adoption. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Okay, and then we have one more, ACE, non-discrimination on the basis of disability. We actually do not have a current policy on this.
Right.
So we are going to adopt the MASC policy and just remove the MASC reference to policy IGB that they have, as it does not apply to us.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to, for our first reading of ACE. It's a brand-new policy. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mary. You did a good job. And Elaine. Elaine's on the committee too, right?
Yes.
Both of you, for all the work you're putting
Dr.
in.
Nash, too.
And Dr. Nash.
Sorry, I said mess up the tobacco one and change it all.
But Dr.
Oh,
Nash
no,
is
no, no,
getting
that's
paid
good.
for it. You're not. And
That's
Elaine's
true.
not.
That is true.
You're getting a better reward anyways.
Oh, right, right. What do I
Got to
get?
put a price tag, it's priceless, like that commercial, priceless.
I'm just teasing.
I know that. All said was well.
Okay.
Okay.
Consideration of requests for non-resident enrollment policy JF. Dr. Nash.
Yes, let me just pull this, okay. I have received a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Kunkel of Dudley. What do I say, the address at this point?
Is that Ed Kunkel?
I do not know.
Oh, okay.
I'm
No,
trying.
I was just
Requesting
Yes, I know.
that their daughter Hannah be allowed to remain enrolled as a senior next year at Shepherd Hill Regional High School. This request comes about because they will no longer be residents in Dudley after this summer. In accordance with policy JF, section 5, exceptions 1, although it's really not exception 1 because I read the policy and it's a little awkward, but I'm calling it exception 1. This would need to receive approval from the superintendent as well as approval from the school committee. I recommend that in accordance with your policy, you approve this request for Hannah Kunkel to stay enrolled next year as a senior at Shepherd
Okay.
Hill Regional High School.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Are they remaining in state?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Okay, anything else? All right, all in favor?
Okay.
Motion
We will let
carries,
them
it's
know.
unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
And then we're setting the date, Kathy and I are on the negotiations for the wage and benefits for support personnel. So we're going to set a date
Well,
for that.
usually we have Mr. Matthews speak to all the groups first, so you're going to do it that way this time before we
Again.
meet, or how do you want to do that?
I'm more than happy to do that if you like.
I think you sent out letters and they sent
Right.
questions, then we get together as a group before we met with them.
Remember, we did meet with them, too.
No, but he
Yeah,
does the
he
work, then
does.
we go
Yeah.
talk between us among ourselves, then we speak with the groups individually. That's how we did it in the past.
Yeah, I'll take a look at what we did
Yeah.
last time,
I think
and
you sent out an email.
we'll look to get letters out
Yeah.
next week with hopes of meeting the following week.
I want to get that back from them, sure.
And who was on that, just for my?
Just the two of us.
It's
He just
Okay.
did.
just the two of us and Rich.
But he's getting big, right?
Okay, next meeting dates. School committee meetings, Wednesday, April 10th, Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 7 PM. Wednesday, April 24th, Charlton Middle School, 7 PM. Budget and Finance Subcommittee, Tuesday, April 9th, and that'll be 9 AM, and that's in the central office. Policy Review Subcommittee, Monday, April 8th, Shepherd Hill Regional High School, and that is at 9 AM. Future agenda items, April 10th, update on Teaching and Learning Policy Review Subcommittee, FY20 budget, requests for 1 year unpaid leave of absence, Food Service Director report, vaping detectors. Anybody else want to?
DRA discussion.
Okay.
The master facilities plan
Yeah.
discussion.
And Mars
And Mars,
discussion.
yes.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Executive session, that brings us up to, we will be entering into executive session this evening to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation with non-union personnel, if any open meeting, and union personnel, we're doing both. If any open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiation with union personnel. Dudley-Charlton Teachers Association and the non-union personnel superintendent elect contract, okay?
Could you repeat
Yeah, I know.
What was that again?
I just read the whole thing, that Sandy. Always take a roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. We're in executive session.